The wind touches you before you notice anything else. A thin, delicate brush against your skin, subtle enough to pass as nothing, yet unmistakably real. But tonight, allow one impossible thought to settle over you like a slow falling shadow. What if that touch was never air in motion? What if it was space-time itself, drifting across you? The question drops fast, like a stone falling through still water. It shouldn't make sense. Air moves. Pressure shifts. Heat rises. That is what we were taught. But the body knows when something is wrong long before the mind rejects it. Because every so often, the wind arrives when the air is perfectly still. No movement, no gradient, no storm whispering on the horizon. Just a faint drift sliding over your skin as if the world had exhaled through an unseen mouth. You're listening to Whispers of the Universe. If your heart feels gentle enough tonight, even the smallest sign of support helps this quiet place stay alive. The old explanation says wind is only air seeking balance. Warm air rises, cool air rushes in, pressure rearranges itself like restless furniture. Everything is physical, measurable, predictable. A closed system, neat. But neatness is often the first lie the universe tells to keep us calm. Because space-time, this invisible stage beneath every force, was never truly still. Einstein treated it as flexible. Quantum theory treats it as restless. Gravity treats it as something that can twist. But everyday life treats it as nothing. We behave as though space-time is a silent floor that never creaks, never shifts, never breathes. And yet, something brushes past us. Something that acts like a breeze, but behaves unlike any air we know. If you slow your breath now, truly slow it, you'll notice an odd conflict inside your memory. You've felt wind in places where there should be no wind. Narrow halls, closed rooms, forest pockets sealed from circulation. Moments when no leaves were moving, no grass was bending, nothing around you acknowledged the touch you alone seemed to feel. The air was dead, but the world wasn't still. What if that wasn't air behaving strangely, but space-time casually revealing itself? Imagine space-time not as a void, but as a subtle fluid. A medium so perfectly transparent that we confuse its motion with the motion of matter. If it drifted sideways just slightly, everything inside it would appear to move. Dust would stir, grass would bow. A curtain might tremble as though a breath had grazed it. Not because the air moved first, but because the fabric that carries the air shifted beneath it. There is a peculiar comfort in imagining wind as air. It keeps the universe small, predictable. But if the wind is space-time drifting, then every breeze that touches you is the physical echo of a cosmic movement. A reminder that the universe is not a silent stage, but a river, flowing beneath your feet and across your skin. And here comes the first rise, quiet, steady, measured. Think about how wind forms in conventional meteorology. It depends on pressure gradients. But pressure gradients don't appear instantly. They need time, heat, movement. They must be built. Yet some winds arrive without warning, without cause, without any measurable preparation. They arrive early, as if something else has already shifted before the air could respond. When wind behaves faster than air can move, the explanation stops being atmospheric. It becomes geometric, because geometry, the geometry of space-time, can change without waiting for matter to catch up. And here is where the twist begins to turn, soft but irreversible. If space-time drifted across the surface of Earth, even at speeds so small we could barely detect them, objects inside that drift would move as if pushed, not by air, but by the shifting of the invisible grid that holds them. A faint drift of the metric, a gentle slide of the manifold, a small rearrangement of the cosmic scaffolding. Your skin, sensitive to acceleration and friction, might register the shift long before your mind finds language for it. You might call it wind because that is the only word you have, but your body doesn't care about words. It only cares about forces, and the force you felt might not have belonged to the air at all. Picture an object floating in water. If the water moves, the object moves, whether the water is visible or not. Now picture yourself as the object. Picture space-time as the water. Now, picture that water flowing. What you call wind may simply be the sensory echo of that flow brushing past you, a universe-sized current slipping along your surface, an intimate contact with something older and quieter than air could ever be. Space-time does not need your permission to move. It moves because mass curves it. It moves because rotation drags it. It moves because gravity waves ripple through it. It moves because the universe refuses to be still. And if space-time is always drifting, then wind is not a local phenomenon. It is a consequence of the universe flowing around you, which leads to a question that slides gently beneath this chapter like a shadow preparing its next breath. If the wind you feel is space-time drifting across you, then why does that drift choose a direction at all? And as that question hovers, unclaimed, it pulls you forward, into the next quiet layer of the night, where directions behave like secrets waiting to be found, and something faint continues to drift. The faint drift returns before you're ready for it. A soft push from nowhere, so light you might mistake it for your own imagination leaning forward. But there is something wrong with the way it touches you, not the pressure, not the temperature, the direction. Because tonight, the direction comes first, long before any air mass moves, long before a pressure system can rise or collapse, long before weather even realizes it should change. The direction of the wind sometimes appears on its own, like a whisper choosing a path before it chooses a voice. It shouldn't happen. Meteorology doesn't allow it. Fluid dynamics doesn't predict it. And yet, instruments observe it. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of steadiness that unsettles anyone who watches patterns too closely. Winds shifting before pressure. Winds leading storms instead of following them. Winds choosing a route before the air decides to come along. It feels like a contradiction. But contradiction is only the universe asking you to look again. If you quiet your breath and follow the memory of every strange breeze you've ever felt, you'll realize something subtle. Direction is often the first thing that arrives, not motion. A curtain leans slightly before any draft exists. A grass blade tilts before its neighbors even react. A cold line slides across your cheek, not because the air cooled, but because something has already turned. Air does not anticipate, but space-time does. Here, in the gentle rise of this thought, the old model starts to soften. Meteorology tells a clean story. Pressure differences create wind, and direction is just the path of least resistance. But that story assumes space-time is perfectly still, perfectly neutral, perfectly irrelevant, a silent grid. Yet every real measurement of the universe disagrees. LIGO has shown us space trembles. Frame dragging shows it twists. Gravity shows it bends. Quantum fields show it fluctuates. Nothing about space-time is neutral, but we still pretend it is. And that is why direction seems so strange, because we are trying to explain a phenomenon of movement using a framework that refuses to acknowledge the movement beneath it. Direction is not the air deciding. It is space-time turning, a rotation not of matter, but of geometry itself. Imagine the invisible fabric shifting slightly sideways, a tilt too small to trouble planets, but enough to graze the surface of Earth. When space-time turns, everything inside it feels the nudge, not through pressure, but through orientation. Your skin feels that first, not the air, not the leaves. You, because your body is not sensing wind, it is sensing alignment, a reorientation of the invisible scaffolding that holds you. And now, the twist arrives, quiet but certain. If direction appears before air moves, then the direction does not belong to the air. It belongs to the substrate the air sits in. Space-time leans, air follows, wind obeys. This means wind is not choosing a path through the world is choosing a path through space-time. A faint drift nudges the grid beneath everything. Matter reacts. Air moves second, but your body, always more honest than your theories, feels the shift first. And if space-time can turn, if it can lean, if it can reorient itself before matter responds, then turbulence, gusts, sudden bursts, and incomprehensible swirls may not be the chaos of weather at all. They may be the fingerprints of geometry breaking its symmetry, the whisper of a structure adjusting, a ripple, a correction, a movement of something deeper than wind. Which brings a quiet question to the edge of your awareness. the way a shadow approaches the edge of a flame. If direction comes from space-time turning, then what happens when that turn is not smooth? When the fabric doesn't just lean, but quivers? And with that question trembling softly in the air, the night opens a new threshold, gently pulling you toward the next drift, where turbulence begins to look less like weather and more like geometry, remembering how to break. If you listen closely, you can almost feel the fabric preparing its next move, a faint drift, waiting to become something sharper. It begins as a quiver so faint you might mistake it for the echo of your own breath, a brief twitch in the air, a fragile flick of movement that shouldn't be there because nothing around you gives it permission to exist. The grass remains still. The branches hold their posture. The air temperature has not shifted. And yet, something cuts through the quiet, like a thin blade moving beneath a sheet of paper. A sudden jolt of wind, sharp, unanchored, unexplained. Meteorology has a name for this turbulence, a word meant to tame the wildness of something scientists still struggle to predict. But tonight, let that word loosen its grip. Let it drift away. Let the phenomenon stand naked in your awareness. Because the wind you just felt had no source. It was not the consequence of rising air or falling air, not the effect of convection or pressure imbalance, or heat climbing upward like an invisible staircase. It felt more like displacement, as if some invisible hand had brushed through the world, pushing the air aside only because the world was in its way. A tremor, not of air, but of the stage the air rests on. If you stay quiet long enough, your senses start telling a story your mind has been taught to dismiss. A gust that arrives too abruptly, a swirl too localized to belong to any front, a drop in stillness that behaves less like weather and more like someone flicking the fabric of the world. Air does not behave this way on its own. Not with this suddenness, not with this precision, not with this emptiness surrounding it. The deeper explanation begins in the silence beneath the wind, where the atmosphere sits inside a geometry we rarely acknowledge, where space-time, whatever it truly is, remains in constant negotiation with the forces that shape it. We treat turbulence as the failure of air to behave neatly. But perhaps it is not the air that fails. Perhaps it is something deeper that moves suddenly, and the air, confused and compliant, scrambles to follow. Breathe slowly and imagine space-time not as emptiness, but as a finely woven fabric stretching across every direction your mind can reach. A structure that can bend, ripple, tighten, and relax. Now imagine that fabric trembling for a moment. Just a moment. A brief, delicate adjustment, too small to bend starlight, too weak to disturb the orbit of planets, but enough to nudge the curtain of air that covers the Earth. You would feel that tremble as turbulence, not because the air moved with intention, but because the geometry underneath it shifted its weight. On quiet nights like this, the idea becomes easier to entertain, not as a theory, but as a sensation you have always carried without knowing its name. Every sudden gust you've ever felt, every unpredictable jab of wind may have been a tiny correction in the invisible foundation of your world. No thunder required, no storm, no thermal machinery spinning in the background, just a soft readjustment of the framework, holding everything in place. For decades, scientists have attempted to cage turbulence in equations. Supercomputers simulate it with millions of parameters. Models approximate its behavior like shadows approximating the shape of a flame. But turbulence continues to dodge exact solutions. It remains the wild heart of fluid dynamics, unbroken, uncontained. It resists explanation because the explanation may not live within the air at all. Something beneath the air is shifting. A small oscillation of curvature, a glitch of geometry, a pulse in the manifold, a low whisper in the fabric that the air tries desperately to translate. Like a violin string vibrating beneath a thin layer of dust, the dust moves, not because it wants to, but because the string beneath it cannot stay still. And what is air if not a dust of molecules? Suspended, shaken only when the structure below them changes. A single gravitational wave passing through Earth can stretch and compress space by a distance smaller than a proton. LIGO detects only the strongest ones. The subtle ones slip through quietly, too gentle for machines built to measure cosmic violence. But your skin, your equilibrium, your instincts, were not built for cosmic scales. They were built for the immediate, for the smallest shift in balance, for the faintest change in acceleration. Your body can feel what machines ignore. Humans sense acceleration more honestly than they sense temperature, more intuitively than they sense pressure. And turbulence is nothing if not an acceleration with no visible cause. A sudden push from nowhere, a sudden pull from nowhere, a sudden movement of something that refuses to announce itself. If space-time trembles, the air must move. Light will not bend enough to notice. Gravity will not fluctuate enough to measure. But the wind will respond, because the wind is the messenger of the invisible. You have felt this in moments of uneasy calm, right before a storm, or in a forest that seems too still, or walking alone when everything seems quiet, but the air behaves as if responding to something only it can hear. Air is honest. It repeats the motion of whatever moves beneath it. When space-time shifts upward, the air rises. When space-time dips, the air falls. When space-time twists, localized eddies appear. Those strange, small whirlwinds that seem to come from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Nature cannot hide these signs. Turbulence exposes them. Think of a gust you once felt that arrived like a slap, quick, sharp, and unconnected to anything happening around it. For that gust to exist in conventional physics, something should have produced it. Heat rising, pressure falling, temperature gradients forming. But sometimes none of these are present. The gust emerges, lives, and dies in a moment, like a breath of something passing through you that didn't belong to the air. Those moments are not mistakes. They are not anomalies to be buried. They are leaks in the illusion of stillness. If space-time is restless, then turbulence is the signature of its restlessness. And the restlessness is not random. Earth's rotation drags space-time slightly around it. A phenomenon measured by gravity probe B, small but undeniably real. Mountains distort space-time. Valleys stretch it. The mass of the planet pulls the fabric downward. Tides of the moon pull it upward. Even heat can change density distributions in the crust, creating tiny local variations. Every one of these distortions requires the surrounding geometry to adjust. And when geometry adjusts, the air inside it must respond. A whirl of wind is simply a whirl of space-time translated into motion. A sudden downward push of air feels like the world exhaling. But maybe the world didn't exhale. Maybe the fabric sagged for an instant. A gentle dip, just enough to make the molecules of air fall with it. Even the smallest dip can create a gust sharp enough to move branches. The air is not misbehaving. It is cooperating with the unseen. As you sit with this idea, something in it begins to widen. A realization that turbulence is not chaos. It only looks chaotic because we are measuring the wrong thing. We measure temperature, but not curvature. Pressure, but not the density of the metric. Motion, but not the trembling of the frame holding that motion. A glass of water ripples if the table shakes. Focusing on the water and ignoring the table will never give you the full truth. The air is the water. Space-time is the table. And turbulence is the ripple. In this light, the chaotic nature of the wind begins to take on a kind of coherence. It reacts to something older and quieter than air. Something that underlies all motion. Something that chooses its moments. You may have wondered why turbulence often appears near mountains. Why gusts strike with unpredictable force along ridges and cliffs. It is not simply because mountains obstruct wind. Mountains obstruct space-time. They warp the fabric deeply because of their mass. Air only follows the curvature laid beneath it. When the fabric bends sharply, the air twists sharply. When the fabric tightens, the air accelerates. When the fabric relaxes, the air softens into calm. We watch the air, but the air watches space-time. And now, a quieter insight settles behind your thoughts. Perhaps turbulence feels unsettling because your body senses that the foundation is shifting. It is not the wind that alarms you. It is the change in motion. A momentary instability in the frame your balance depends on. Your inner ear listens to acceleration before your mind gives it meaning. Your nerves feel the faintest change in momentum. Your skin reacts instinctively to the smallest deviation in force. A gentle tremble in space-time may feel like a sudden shudder in the wind. This is why even small turbulence can make a person pause. as though their instincts caught something their eyes could not see. You are not reacting to the air. You are reacting to the architecture beneath it, and that thought leads somewhere deeper, like the slow opening of a hidden door. If the air reacts to space-time tremors, then every gust is a clue that matter is not merely surviving inside the universe, but participating in it, responding to its adjustments, feeling its shifts. A gust of wind is not a local disturbance. It is a message from the geometry around you. And, if that message exists, then matter itself must be capable of reading it, which opens the next quiet mystery, one that waits just beyond the edge of this breath. If matter responds to the trembling of space-time, then what does that make matter? Is it passive? Is it listening? Is it interpreting the invisible through motion? The question remains suspended in the air, like a particle waiting for a force to claim it. And as this thought stretches out before you, the night begins to tilt, subtly, gently, toward the realization that matter may not be a mere occupant of space-time, but a sensor shaped to reveal its hidden currents. Somewhere in that subtle shift, the world prepares for what comes next. A quiet exploration of how matter behaves when the fabric beneath it continues to move. And still, through all of this, a faint drift brushes past, as though encouraging you to follow it deeper. The stillness holds for a moment that feels longer than it truly is. Just long enough for your senses to settle, just long enough for the world to feel like a closed room suspended in quiet equilibrium. But then, without warning, something shifts again. Not in the air, not in the temperature, not in the world you can see, but in the weight of the moment itself. A leaf quivers, not because wind touched it, but because something deeper passed beneath it like a muted tremor, a vibration without a source, a whisper without breath. And what happens next is subtle but unmistakable. The leaf moves before the air does, a motion out of sequence, an effect without a visible cause, a gesture responding to something you cannot touch. That is where the question begins. Not in turbulence, not in direction, not in pressure, but in the strange fact that matter reacts before the atmosphere does. If wind begins in space-time, what does matter become in that equation? The moment stretches lightly, like fabric being pulled at its edges, and you sense a simple, unavoidable truth. Matter is not passive. It is not waiting for the air to decide something. It is not reacting to heat or cold with the blank obedience of a machine. Matter solid, grounded, rooted in the gravity of Earth, seems to anticipate the invisible in a way the atmosphere cannot. A branch bends early. A blade of grass leans the wrong way. A ripple forms on water when no wind has arrived to claim responsibility. Small things easily dismissed, but not if you're watching closely. Not if you're listening beneath the surface. It begins to feel as though matter has a sensitivity that air lacks, an instinctive awareness of the shifts in the underlying fabric that cradle everything. A faint recognition, a silent agreement with the movement of space-time. This is where the idea deepens, slowly, like a sound descending into lower notes. If space-time drifts, even by the smallest margin, the geometry holding matter shifts with it. Matter is embedded in the structure of space-time. Matter follows the curves of space-time as faithfully as shadows follow the body that casts them. So, when the fabric moves, matter moves first. Air, being lighter and less constrained, responds afterward, slower to acknowledge the tremble, slower to correct itself, slower to echo the deeper adjustment. Your senses may not catch the order of these movements, but your intuition does. Something is always slightly off when the air seems to chase the world rather than guide it. Stand in a quiet place long enough, and you will feel it too. A surface shifting under a layer of motion, a hierarchy of response in which matter is the first listener. But why? Why should matter, heavy, solid, anchored, react before the weightless air above it? The answer lies not in the material itself, but in the relationship between matter and the geometry that shapes its path. Air lives around space-time. Matter lives inside it. Air is free to swirl, resist, detach, scatter. Matter is bound to the curvature, held tight in its embrace, unable to resist even the smallest tilt in the grid beneath it. When space-time shifts, matter has no choice but to follow, not out of obedience, but out of identity. Matter is nothing more than space-time folded tightly enough to gain mass. You can feel the truth of this in your own body. The lightest tremble of the ground beneath you commands your muscles before your mind forms language for the movement. A subtle acceleration shifts your balance. A minor deviation in gravity changes the weight of your breath. Small things, but each one is your body responding directly to the foundation. Air knows none of this. Air floats above the rules, reacting only when forced. Matter, however, feels everything. Every tremble, every adjustment, every passing wave in the geometry beneath its form. Imagine a sheet hung between two poles, with stones resting on its surface. If the sheet tightens or loosens, the stones move immediately. But dust floating above the sheet only stirs once the air itself has been disturbed by the stone's motion. Matter is the stone. Air is the dust. Space-time is the sheet. This image lingers for a while, quietly reshaping your understanding. It is not turbulence alone that hints at the motion of space-time. It is the reaction of matter itself. Think of all the strange moments you've experienced. A door that swings slightly despite still air. A floorboard that creaks with no weight shifting upon it. A thin veil of smoke that shifts horizontally with no visible pressure change. Ripples forming on water in precise patterns that no local motion should produce. These moments, once dismissed as environmental quirks, begin to look like responses. Matter, acknowledging the adjustments of the foundation beneath it. And if matter reacts this way, then perhaps the world is full of these responses. We simply stop noticing them as we grow older. Children notice. Animals notice. They sense shifts that adults rationalize away. But the truth remains. Matter is the first witness. The idea grows deeper still when you think of gravitational waves. Not the huge ones detected by observatories, but the small ones. The constant background hum of space-time, vibrating with events too distant or too subtle to measure. These tiny ripples pass through Earth all the time. They stretch and compress space by amounts far too small for machines to register. But matter, intimately connected to the curvature, feels each change directly. Perhaps the leaf that trembles is answering a wave older than the solar system. Perhaps the surface of a lake quivers in recognition of a cosmic event that died billions of years ago. Perhaps you, walking alone at night, have felt an unexplained moment of imbalance because space-time shifted beneath you just slightly. A whisper of a ripple surviving across unimaginable distance. Matter is the diary in which these stories are written. Air is merely the commentary that follows. But if matter responds first, then something profound begins to emerge. Matter may not simply exist in space-time. It may participate in it. Your body is made of matter. It is an instrument tuned to the invisible, even if you do not consciously hear the music. Every step you take is guided by how space-time curves under you. Every sensation of falling is your body, reading the geometry's intentions. Every instinct of balance is an interpretation of space-time's behavior. You may not notice, but your body is constantly adjusting, interpreting, realigning itself with the shape of the unseen. In this light, matter becomes more than substance. It becomes a sensor, a quiet, patient listener, shaped to decode the movement of the world beneath it. The idea reshapes everything you thought you understood about wind. Wind is not only air responding to itself. It is air responding to the world's most fundamental adjustments, chasing after matter's earlier reaction, like an echo pursuing the sound that birthed it. A rock shifts before the dust above it jumps. A leaf trembles before the gust arrives. Your skin tightens before the air cools. Everywhere, matter leads. Air follows. And now, with the night carrying this realization deeper into you, another question rises from the quiet. A question that does not seek an answer yet, but simply invites you to walk closer to the truth. If matter responds to the tremble of space-time, then what happens when the tremble becomes a flow? Not a shiver, not a pulse, but a sustained movement, a drift that stretches across regions and seasons, across continents and oceans, a flow that lasts long enough for the world to build weather around it. What becomes of matter then? Does it continue to lead? Or does something new happen? Something larger? Something deeper? something that could make the entire atmosphere feel like a secondary consequence of a hidden current beneath it. The leaf that trembled earlier now rests again, but the memory of its movement lingers like a quiet fingerprint. Something touched it. Something brushed through the world. Something moved that was not the air. And whatever that something is, it is not done yet. A faint drift slides through the moment, too soft to disturb anything now, but clear enough for the attentive mind. And in that gentle slide lies the path ahead, a path that leads into the deeper realization waiting for you. If matter responds to the invisible, then perhaps weather itself is only the visible edge of something larger moving beneath the world. A current that belongs not to the air, but to the space-time that carries everything. Something subtle is preparing to reveal itself. And the world, every leaf, every grain of dust, every stone, is already reacting. The night waits. Just beyond the edge of silence, the explanation begins to gather. And if you listen, you can almost feel the shift preparing its next breath, drawing you gently toward the place where the hidden current under weather begins to make itself known. Something shifts again, not violently, not loudly, but with a kind of confidence that belongs to things older than storms. A subtle rearrangement in the air around you, a quiet gesture that seems to rise from beneath the world rather than above it. For a moment, everything feels misaligned. The trees, the open space, even the silence around you seems to lean slightly toward a direction it has not yet committed to. And then it comes, a slow, deliberate breath of wind. But this time, you can tell something is wrong with the story you were taught to believe. This wind does not feel like an answer to temperature. It does not carry the signature of pressure changing. It does not belong to weather maps or forecasts. It arrives before any of those things make sense. A wind without a cause. Meteorology teaches that wind emerges from gradients. Warm air rising, cold air sinking, pressure rearranging itself as though searching for a more comfortable position. And yes, this is true for many winds, but not all. There are winds that ignore textbook rules, winds that appear ahead of pressure changes, winds that shift directions long before fronts arrive, winds that wait for nothing. Wind should be obedient, but some winds behave like they are answering a call from somewhere deeper, responding to an influence that does not belong to the atmosphere. And if you stand still long enough, the realization begins its slow descent into you. The air moves second. Something else always moves first. That something reveals itself only in the absence of normal explanations. When weather remains unchanged, when temperature is steady, when humidity is motionless, and yet the air decides to move anyway, you are left with a single possibility. Wind is reacting to a current that does not live inside the air. A current running beneath weather, not within it. A current that does not care for storms, or seasons, or pressure maps. A current older than meteorology, older than the Earth's climate, perhaps older than the Earth itself. A current belonging to space-time. The thought deepens as the night grows quieter, and in this quiet, something becomes unmistakably clear. Weather is built on top of something, a layer beneath it rarely noticed, never taught, but essential, foundational, unavoidably present. The atmosphere is not the first mover. It is the second. Imagine a river hidden beneath the ground, deep, silent, flowing beneath the visible world. On the surface, grass bends as if obeying only the breeze. But beneath that small motion is a larger river, pushing its influence upward, shaping everything that floats above it. Now, replace the river with space-time. Replace the surface with weather. Suddenly, the behavior of wind begins to make a different kind of sense. Picture space-time flowing across the planet. Not fast, not dramatic, but steady, consistent, quiet in the way that the deepest truths often are. The atmosphere, resting on top of this flowing foundation, cannot help but respond. It is carried, guided, nudged by the movement of the structure that holds it in place. Wind is not simply air searching for equilibrium. It is air reacting to the direction of the current beneath it. You can feel this most clearly in moments where the wind anticipates events it should not know about. The way a gust arrives hours before a storm, as though receiving a message long before clouds gather. The way wind patterns shift at the edge of deserts, not because of heat, but because the underlying fabric of the world bends differently there. The way a faint breeze travels through a canyon with no relation to temperature, as though sliding along a deeper contour carved long before the air arrived. Air is not deciding, air is complying. And once you recognize this, the world starts to look layered, like a painting where the top strokes hide the underdrawing of an older idea. Climate, storms, jets, breezes, they are the visible strokes. The underdrawing is the drift of space-time. The deeper you breathe, the clearer this image becomes. It is not mystical, not metaphorical. It is structural. Space-time is not static. It cannot be. Everything that has mass pushes against it. Everything that moves pulls it. Everything that rotates drags it. And the Earth, massive, spinning, tilted, heated unevenly, orbiting a star that is orbiting a galaxy, is continuously reshaping the fabric beneath it. These shifts do not stop. They do not rest. They ripple, stretch, contract, spiral, a dance of geometry far more ancient than storms. And the atmosphere, thin and delicate, rides on top of this shifting field. Wind becomes the visible trace of an invisible movement, a curtain revealing the gestures of the hand behind it. The more you think about it, the more the atmosphere resembles a veil, responsive, fragile, effortlessly moved by forces it cannot see. A veil draped over a river of geometry. And now, another observation quietly emerges. Some winds do not originate near the surface at all. High-altitude winds often move long before surface pressure changes. Jet streams shift courses days before tropospheric conditions respond. Upper-level flows alter direction without matching changes below them. Conventional explanations cover much of this, but never all of it. They leave behind a residue of unanswered questions, small anomalies, gentle disobediences, moments where the atmosphere behaves like a follower of something deeper. If the air were truly autonomous, its movement would match its conditions, but it doesn't always. And that discrepancy is where the hidden current whispers. Imagine standing on a beach at night. The air feels calm at first, but then, long before the tide changes, long before any wave crashes differently, a breeze rises, not from the land, not from the sea, but from something deeper that seems to tug at the world, as though an unseen ocean beneath the Earth's crust shifted, and the air whispered its response. Of course, there is no ocean beneath you, but there is something else, a sea of geometry responding to forces far older than water. Space-time curves subtly as the moon passes overhead. The Earth's rotation twists it in delicate spirals. Mass distribution shifts with tides, with continental drift, with thermal expansion. All of this creates motion in the underlying field. And the air reacts. Long ago, humans sensed these shifts without understanding them. Ancient sailors predicted winds hours before they formed. Nomads crossing deserts could feel the direction of future gusts. Animals still sense these changes instinctively. They are not reading the air. They are reading the world beneath the air. The deeper structure, the hidden current. You might imagine this current as a river, but rivers have edges and directions. This flow has neither. It moves with the earth and against it, with the rotation and against it, responding to forces that intersect across scales so vast we have no names for them. To imagine it correctly, think of space-time as a fluid made not of particles, but of potential, a medium through which forces shape paths and patterns. When this medium shifts, everything inside it moves. Not dramatically, not violently, but inevitably. A drift of space-time can be small, so small that atoms hardly notice. But air, with its fragility and looseness, translates that small shift into wind. Wind becomes the language of space-time spoken through matter, a translation so ancient and continuous that we no longer hear its origin. And now, something else begins to rise beneath your awareness. A strange, quiet truth about the nature of the atmosphere. Weather might not be the first storyteller of the planet. It might be the narrator of a deeper script, a script written by the movement of the fabric that holds the world. If the underlying current shifts eastward, winds become easterly before pressure systems say they should. If the current bends upward, updrafts form in seemingly stable air. If the current compresses, gusts appear without thermal cause. If the current stretches, Winds weaken unexpectedly. Every unexplained wind, every anomaly, every inconsistency, every meteorological curiosity may be a clue pointing to the same hidden truth. Weather is not autonomous, it is an echo, and wind is the echo we feel on our skin. As this idea takes hold, the world feels different, larger, deeper, less confined to the familiar language of fronts and storms. For the first time, wind feels like a messenger carrying news of movements far below the atmosphere. And yet, a question rises now. A question the night seems to hold in its breath. If space-time is flowing beneath the atmosphere, how does that flow begin? What sets it in motion? What shapes its path? Temperature does not. Pressure does not. Moisture does not. The atmosphere cannot move space-time. It is the other way around. So where does the current come from? The answer is not in the air, nor on the surface of Earth, but deeper beneath the crust, beneath the mantle, beneath the very idea of beneath. It comes from the rotation of the planet, from the curvature induced by its mass, from the tides of gravity sculpting the fabric like fingers tracing patterns in sand, from the slow drift of the moon, from the sun's pull, from the Milky Way's rotation, from dark matter streams brushing past the solar system. The Earth does not sit still in space-time. It journeys, it carves, it drags, it swims through currents far older than itself, and as it moves, the underlying fabric flows around it. Sometimes gently, sometimes abruptly, always inevitably. Wind is the surface expression of this deep movement, a subtle, almost accidental artifact of a universe that refuses to be motionless. And here, as this realization settles, the night shifts lightly around you. Something quiet aligns, as if preparing for the next layer of understanding. Because if space-time flows beneath weather, then there must be moments rare but real, when the flow changes before the air has time to respond. Moments when the wind should arrive early, not in violation of physics, but in obedience to a deeper one. Moments when the direction of space-time turns, long before the atmosphere learns the new shape of the world. Moments when the wind whispers a secret, hours before weather catches up. Moments like the ones you have felt before, but never understood. Moments that lead you now, gently, into the next revelation. The one forming just beyond the edge of silence. If there truly is a hidden current beneath weather, then somewhere, somehow, there must be signs of it moving ahead of everything else. Signs that the world reacts before the air does. Signs that the wind can arrive early. And in that thought, the night opens its next doorway, inviting you toward the place where the earliest winds begin to reveal the motion of the space-time river beneath them. A faint drift brushes quietly past you, as if to say, watch closely now. The next movement comes before the air does. The world grows still again, as if holding its breath for something it already knows is coming. It is the kind of stillness that feels staged, too poised, too perfect, too balanced, as though the quiet is waiting for a cue only it can hear. And then, just when the moment settles completely, the wind arrives, not strongly, not loudly, just early. A soft drift touches your skin, sliding in from a direction the atmosphere has not yet agreed to follow. The trees do not move. The clouds do not shift. No thermal plume rises. No pressure front approaches. Nothing in the air predicts this wind. Nothing prepares for it. Nothing explains it, but the wind arrives anyway. A gesture without permission. A movement without precedent. A beginning without context. It feels as though something deeper has already made a decision, and the air is only now receiving the news. The early wind is not rare, though few people pay attention to it. It slips into the world quietly, almost respectfully, as if aware that its presence is out of sequence. Fishermen feel it before storms they cannot yet see. Migrating birds respond to it before atmospheric changes register. Ancient sailors read it as a message from distant shifts. Even today, weather sensors pick up small directional breezes hours, sometimes days before pressure fields evolve to justify them. But most of us never notice. We think the world simply changes without reason. We accept the early wind as a quirk of nature, instead of the quiet evidence that something else has moved first. If you listen carefully, if you stand still enough, If you let your awareness stretch into the space beneath the air, you may catch the truth hiding beneath the timing. The wind is early because space-time has already shifted. Imagine the world as though it were resting on a subtle ocean of geometry, a sea that moves not with water, but with curvature, not with tides, but with gravitational sway, not with turbulence, but with alignments and adjustments older than any weather pattern. Most of the time, the atmosphere follows calmly along this deeper motion. Air adapts quickly. It surrenders to new shapes of the underlying field with the obedience of something accustomed to being carried. But sometimes, the adjustment of the deeper field is too subtle for the atmosphere to catch immediately. The shift begins quietly, with a small tilt, a change of orientation, a ripple of curvature, smoothing itself into a new configuration. The air lags behind, not because it resists, but because its mass and distribution give it inertia. It needs time to understand the change, to translate geometric instruction into meteorological response. But your skin does not need time. Your body feels the slight redirection long before the atmosphere completes its correction. The early wind becomes your first glimpse into the timing of the invisible, a message that does not wait for the air to interpret it, a gesture that travels ahead of the weather that will later justify its existence. And that is why the early wind never feels strong. Strength is not its purpose. Timing is. It is the trace, the preview of the direction the deeper world has begun to take. You can witness this phenomenon almost anywhere once you learn to see it. Stand on a field before sunrise. The air is cool and still, but a faint breeze slides sideways through the quiet. Hours later, the weather map will update. A front has shifted, a region has expanded, a pressure basin has formed, but the wind knew long before the sky changed. Walk through a canyon in late afternoon. No air current should form, yet temperature differentials have not developed. Shadows are still rising up the walls, and yet a narrow drift begins to move through the stones. Later that evening, the valley winds will come alive, but the first current belonged to something deeper than heat. Even in cities, between the rigid walls of buildings, you may feel a soft gesture of wind that does not belong to any atmospheric process. The materials around you, glass, steel, concrete, pulled gently at the curvature in ways too subtle to measure, and the early wind reveals these quiet negotiations. Everywhere, the early wind behaves as if the world has already begun a movement the atmosphere has not yet translated. The deeper current always moves first. Consider what this means for the idea of direction. If space-time shifts before the air responds, then direction is not chosen by the atmosphere. It is inherited from the orientation of the fabric beneath it. The early wind becomes the first indicator of where the world itself is turning, not just where the weather will go. This insight deepens when you reflect on what direction truly is. Direction is not a property of the air. It is a property of the geometry that guides motion. When the deeper current leans, the air must eventually lean with it. But the first particles to respond will always be those least bound by inertia, the wisps, the edges, the bits of air not yet anchored to any larger atmospheric system. These small pieces of air act like scouts. They reveal the movement of the invisible before the full atmosphere follows. They become the first carriers of news, a breeze hours early, a drift before dawn, a tilt in the stillness, a motion that belongs not to weather, but to the deeper river beneath it. At first, this may sound like an intrusion, as though space-time is imposing itself on the atmosphere. But the truth is the opposite. The atmosphere depends on this flow. Wind patterns, climates, jet streams. They are all built on the foundation of the deeper current. You cannot have sustained weather without the motion of space-time beneath it. Even the Coriolis effect, the rotation-induced curvature of winds, might be understood not only as a consequence of Earth's spin, but also as a response to the way space-time spirals gently around the rotating planet. The atmosphere is not free-floating. It is cradled. It is carried. Its movements cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the movement of the structure underneath. And here is where something delicate, almost shy, begins to appear. A realization that does not arrive with force, but settles like the softest kind of truth. If space-time moves first, then the earliest wind is not the beginning of weather. It is the beginning of change. A translation in progress, a message that has only just begun to surface. A ripple breaking the surface of a deeper ocean. And once you recognize this, you begin to see the difference between winds that belong to weather and winds that belong to the world. Weather winds react. World winds announce. What you felt just now, that soft, early drift, was not a reaction. It was an announcement. It was space-time shifting around you. A small tilt, a gentle curve, a subtle change in the direction of the deeper current. This shift will eventually grow large enough to form atmospheric consequences. A front, a storm, a regional wind pattern, a new balance of heat. But all of that is secondary. The primary event, the true beginning, is the movement of the underlying fabric. That is why the earliest winds feel so quiet. They are not meant to disturb, only to inform. You can think of them as the whisper of the planet's geometry, saying, "We are changing direction now. Follow if you wish." And the air, always obedient, always patient, will eventually follow. But the earliest particles, the ones that respond first, are the ones that reveal the truth. They are the evidence that the world beneath the atmosphere is never still. Once you learn to recognize the early wind, you can see patterns that weather alone cannot explain. You can sense shifts that instruments measure only later. You can feel the subtle lean of the world as though gravity itself is adjusting its posture. You can detect movements that seem impossible because the atmosphere has not changed yet, but space-time has. And then the thought arrives, quietly, almost shyly, as though aware of its own weight. If space-time moves first, then there must be places where this early motion becomes visible, not only in small breezes, but in large atmospheric behaviors. Places where the underlying current pushes the world, in ways we have mistaken for ordinary weather. Places where wind seems to appear before its cause, where direction defies explanation, where air seems to know something it should not. And if such places exist, if space-time pushes with enough clarity to guide entire regions of wind, then the early wind is merely the beginning of a much larger discovery. Some winds may not originate on Earth at all. They may belong to the deeper sweep of the planet through the geometry around it, the motion of Earth carving its path through space, dragging the atmosphere into alignment. And this idea, softly unfolding, begins to lead you toward the next quiet realization. If the early wind reveals the shift of the underlying current, then the places where wind arrives earliest must be the places where the space-time beneath them moves most dramatically. Places shaped not by air, but by the world's contours, its masses, its gravitational imbalances, its ancient scars. Places where matter bends the current, causing air to respond early. Places that will show you what it looks like when space-time itself is pulled into curves that the atmosphere must chase. And somewhere in that thought, the night leans gently toward its next breath, a breath carrying you into landscapes where the world's shape writes the first movements of the wind. A faint drift slides through the moment, guiding you softly toward the realization waiting beyond. If wind arrives early, what happens in the places where the Earth bends space-time more sharply than anywhere else? The answer lies ahead, quietly forming, ready to unfold. The early wind fades, leaving behind a quiet that feels stretched, as though the air is waiting for something heavier than itself to make the next move. And for a moment, just a moment, the world seems perfectly flat, perfectly even, perfectly unbent. But the illusion lasts only until you reach the mountains. You feel the change long before your eyes confirm it. The air thickens slightly, gains a weight that doesn't belong to moisture or altitude. Shadows cling more tightly to the ground, as if gravity here has a stronger voice. And the early wind, which moves so freely across the open plains, now hesitates at the feet of stone. Mountains do something to the world that no other landscape does. Something subtle, something old, something the atmosphere answers before it understands. As you step closer, you sense it not in the wind, but in the shape of silence. A strange kind of expectancy lives here, woven into the ridges and slopes. The stillness feels different, thicker, as though the air itself is draped across a deeper curve in the world. And then you realize, the deeper current has reached a barrier, not a wall, not an obstacle, but a place where space-time bends more sharply than the surrounding land can hide. Mountains do not simply rise from the earth, they press downward into the fabric beneath them. Their mass strains the grid of space-time, pulling it tight, forcing it into new shapes. The atmosphere has no choice but to acknowledge. Air passes over grass, air glides above oceans, air meanders across plains, but when air approaches mountains, it does not simply pass. It changes. The first sign is almost imperceptible, a slight redirection of the early wind as it approaches the foothills, as if it senses a path carved not by weather but by curvature. You might expect the wind to flow upward, or around, or to slow. But before the atmosphere remembers what gravity demands of it, the wind does something else entirely. It leans toward the invisible descent beneath the mountain. This is the first truth mountains reveal. They bend space-time downward, not upward. A mountain is not a rise in the world. It is a well. Its height deceives you. The true shape lies below. Air, sensitive but slow to respond, feels this bending first as a change in direction, not yet as motion. A sideways tug, a quiet insistence, a path hinted at before the atmosphere understands the reason. Birds know this. They bank toward slopes long before thermals form. Waterfalls shift subtly aside from cliffs with no wind present. Even sound bends differently near mountains, though we rarely notice. But the wind reveals the truth most clearly. As the early wind approaches the mountain, it does not simply climb. It sinks, just slightly, as though pulled by the weight of the mountain's mass. Not its physical mass, but the curvature that mass imposes on the world. Mountains reshape space-time more dramatically than almost any other feature on Earth. Their mass is immense, yes, but more importantly, their mass is concentrated. Mass concentration creates steep gradients in curvature, channels through which the deeper current flows, and the wind follows, not because the air understands, but because the geometry beneath it leaves no alternative. Imagine a sheet stretched taut across two poles. If you place a heavy stone near one edge, the sheet dips. If a small pebble sits nearby, the pebble will roll toward the stone, even if the sheet appears flat from above. The wind is the pebble. The mountain is the stone. The sheet is space-time. The atmosphere above the foothills begins to shift long before the wind becomes visible. It shifts in posture, in readiness, in quiet pressure that doesn't yet move air, but prepares to. A kind of invisible tension spreads through the layers of the atmosphere, aligning themselves with the deeper contours carved by the mountain. You can feel this alignment even without wind. A tightening in the world, a focus that makes the air seem more intent. The deeper current does not flow randomly across the planet. It seeks pathways where curvature is strongest, where mass pulls most intensely, where the geometry dips into shapes that let the current accelerate. Mountains are gateways for that flow, funnels through which space-time changes direction. And so the wind, ever obedient, begins to reveal these funnels. Stand on the windward side of a mountain and you will feel a wind that seems to have chosen its direction before the weather formed. Stand on the leeward side and you may encounter gusts that come from nowhere, winds that break into chaotic motions, bursts that violate the calm of the valley. These are not atmospheric accidents. They are geometric translations. The deeper current enters the mountain from one direction but exits from another. Space-time curves sharply inward as mass pulls it down, then uncoils on the far side in a sudden release. The air, unable to resist, channels this motion into turbulence, into gusts, into sudden shifts that make mountain winds unpredictable. Pilots know this intimately. A mountain wave can lift an aircraft hundreds of feet in seconds, even when the weather is perfectly calm. The air does not create these waves. The world beneath the air does. This is why some of the strongest winds on Earth occur in mountain passes, not because of weather, but because space-time narrows and accelerates the deeper flow there, squeezing it into a focused current the air must follow. Mountain valleys do not simply collect air, they collect curvature. They are the visible edges of invisible pathways, and the wind uses them as clues. As you walk deeper into the slopes, you may notice that the air behaves strangely, not swirling randomly, but shifting in ways that feel intentional, as though responding to a pattern hidden beneath your feet. A sudden gust flows upward. Then a quieter one answers from the side. Then the stillness returns, only to break a few heartbeats later with another pulse. Each gesture follows a rule invisible to the atmosphere, but obvious to the deeper current. The wind is not confused. It is reading the terrain of space-time. And this leads to a quiet, more profound realization. Mountains are not obstacles to wind. They are amplifiers of the underlying flow. The shape of a mountain becomes the shape of space-time around it. The shape of space-time becomes the shape of the wind. And the wind becomes the visible fingerprint of something you cannot see. Perhaps this explains why people feel different in mountains. Why clarity, alertness, fear, awe, and calm all sharpen. You are not only moving through higher land, you are moving through deeper curvature. Your body senses the subtle acceleration, the quiet shift in the world's geometry, even when the air is still. There are places near mountain peaks where the wind seems to appear from thin air, not rising, not descending, but materializing, caught in the moment between currents. This is not atmosphere generating motion. This is the deeper current breaking through. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it, not as sound, but as feeling. A low, nearly imperceptible hum of movement that pre-exists the air's participation. This hum is the world adjusting around the immovable mass of stone. And now, as you imagine the current flowing across the mountain, something else becomes clear. The early wind you felt before reaching the slopes was a preview of this adjustment. The mountain began shaping the deeper flow long before the air followed. The early wind was simply the first messenger, a light gesture, a faint suggestion of the direction the world was preparing to take. And now, standing among the slopes, you see the completion of that message, the full expression of how space-time bends around mass. Every gust is a sentence. Every calm is a pause. Every sudden shift is a punctuation mark. The wind is not chaotic. It is narrative, a narrative written by the mountain's effect on the deeper current, which leads to a question more delicate than any wind, a question that drifts through your thoughts like an unseen hand turning a page. If mountains bend the deeper current so strongly, what happens when the Earth itself, the whole spinning sphere, begins to drag space-time along with its rotation? What kind of wind appears not from stone, but from the turning of the entire planet? Somewhere in this thought, a soft movement touches your awareness, a hint of a larger force waiting just beyond the horizon of understanding. A force that shapes not valleys, not slopes, but the global behavior of wind. A force that emerges not from the terrain, but from the very motion of the Earth through space-time. And as this realization settles, a faint drift rises again, as though encouraging you to follow it into the next layer of truth. The mountains have shown you how curvature bends wind locally, but the planet has its own curvature, its own drag, its own ability to pull space-time around itself. And somewhere in that planetary pull lies the next revelation, the one forming now like the first breath of a distant storm. What happens to wind when the entire Earth begins to twist the fabric beneath it? The answer is already approaching. Quiet and patient, carried by the deeper current you've only begun to understand. Something in the mountain air lingers behind you as you walk downward. Something that feels less like a memory and more like a reminder that wind is not born in the atmosphere alone. A reminder that the deeper current moves first. A reminder that matter bends the world beneath it, and the world asks the air to follow. But as the last trace of mountain curvature fades, a larger presence begins to emerge. Something wider, softer, more persistent, as if an ocean beneath your feet has begun to turn. Not a gust, not a tremor, not a pulse, a rotation. The Earth is spinning. But tonight the sensation arrives differently, not as a fact, not as a calculation, but as a feeling, a slow, continuous gesture you never truly acknowledged until now. The planet turns beneath you, and with that turning comes a quiet rearrangement of the deeper current. It starts subtly. The air seems to have a direction even when nothing is moving. The stillness feels slanted, as though reality itself has a preferred orientation. Even your breath seems to drift more easily one way than another. You've walked into a region where the movement of the Earth is no longer hidden by the atmosphere. You've stepped into the domain of planetary motion, The rotation of the Earth does more than spin the surface. It drags space-time with it. A real, measurable effect. Tiny by human standards, immense by cosmic ones. Scientists call it frame dragging, the way a spinning body pulls the very fabric of space-time around itself, like a hand stirring water in a bowl. It was once only a dream in Einstein's equations, a quiet implication of general relativity. But gravity probe B, circling the Earth in silent arcs, confirmed the truth. The planet's rotation twists the geometry around it. Not metaphorically, not mathematically, literally. Space itself swirls because the Earth does. If space-time rotates, every particle suspended in it feels that rotation. Air, being the most sensitive of all, responds in patterns the ancient world noticed long before science named them. The trade winds, the jet streams, the spirals of hurricanes, the global patterns that never change direction, never change their fundamental orientation, as though the entire atmosphere were a dancer following the unseen choreography of the planet beneath it. You have been told that these patterns arise from the Coriolis effect, that the rotation of the Earth deflects air moving across its surface. This is true, but it is not the full truth. The deeper current begins the deflection long before the atmosphere joins it. The atmosphere does not drift sideways because it chooses to. It drifts because the world beneath it is twisting the very coordinates of motion. Picture space-time around the Earth like a soft fabric. As the planet spins, it drags the fabric into a swirl, a vast, silent vortex of geometry. The atmosphere, floating somewhere inside this vortex, moves along paths set not only by temperature or pressure, but by the invisible curve of space-time being carried around the Earth. Wind becomes the evidence of frame dragging. You can feel this most clearly near the equator. Stand in the stillness there, in the heavy, unmoving air of a tropical dusk, and you may notice that even when the world is quiet, something in the air leans eastward. A faint preference, a soft inclination, as though the deeper current is whispering its shape through the stillness. This eastward tug is older than climate. It is older than continents. It is older than the atmosphere itself. It is the rotation of the Earth imprinting its motion on space-time. And because space-time moves, the air is asked to follow, but the air cannot follow all at once. It listens in layers, one altitude responding faster than another, one latitude hearing the message sooner, one region translating the invisible swirl into atmospheric motion. This is why global winds form stable patterns that resist seasonal changes, resist localized disruptions, resist the simple explanations of temperature and pressure. They are not driven solely by heat. They are guided by the flow of the fabric beneath them. The Hadley cells, the Ferrel cells, the polar circulations. These are not merely thermal engines. They are the atmosphere's attempt to settle into the rotating geometry that cradles the Earth. The deepest truth is this: wind is global, not because of the air, but because the Earth itself is moving through space-time. The atmosphere is caught between two masters, the sun that heats it and the planet that drags it. The sun gives energy, but the Earth gives direction. The early winds we once thought belonged to local disturbances begin to appear again here on a global scale. A jet stream shifts slightly north, long before the temperature distribution changes. A trade wind strengthens a day before any pressure gradient evolves. A subtropical current bends early, anticipating a shift that meteorology has not yet predicted. The atmosphere is not foreseeing the change. It is reacting to the shift in the deeper current, the slow reorientation of the rotating spacetime that contains it. Even storms obey this hidden structure. A hurricane does not spin because the air wants to rotate. It spins because the spacetime around it is already rotating, gently, subtly, but undeniably. And the storm aligns itself with the underlying swirl. It is not merely deflected, it is guided. The cyclone's spiral is a geometric inheritance. You can feel this guidance even when you cannot see it. Stand in the open during a calm night near the equatorial ocean. The air may be perfectly still, but the world feels like it is leaning in a slow circle around you. Not a dizziness, not motion sickness, but an awareness that the horizon is not fixed. It feels as though the world is turning beneath your feet, and the air is turning with it, but slightly behind, slightly slower, slightly delayed. That delay is the atmosphere's inertia catching up to the geometry's command. And once you feel this delay, a deeper question begins to form inside the quiet of your mind. If the Earth drags spacetime, and spacetime guides the wind, then how much of what we call weather is actually the world translating planetary motion into atmospheric motion? When the Earth speeds slightly in its rotation, as it does due to internal shifts, tidal forces, and redistribution of mass, the wind changes. When the Earth slows, the wind hesitates. When the Earth wobbles on its axis, the atmosphere reorganizes itself. This happens on scales too slow for daily forecasts, but not too slow for the world to feel. The atmosphere is always listening, always adjusting, always aligning itself with the turning of the deeper current. But something more subtle lies beneath this understanding. A quiet, nearly hidden truth about why global wind systems endure for centuries, even when climate changes dramatically. They endure because the rotation of spacetime endures. Weather changes, climate shifts, but the Earth continues to turn. And so long as the Earth turns, the deeper current will swirl. And so long as the deeper current swirls, the wind will bear its signature. This is why the global circulation patterns remain recognizable across ages. The world's geometry is the true architect of the wind. As you take this in, you may begin to sense a kind of order beneath the apparent chaos of weather. A slow, persistent choreography. A dance wide enough to contain storms, gentle enough to lull oceans, precise enough to guide continents of air, without ever announcing its presence. Even the turbulent winds near mountains, the ones that seem wild, unpredictable, irregular, are tiny deviations layered on top of the global flow carved by the Earth's rotation. The surface winds you feel are local, the jet streams above you are regional, but the swirling of spacetime around Earth is planetary. And as this realization settles deeper, another begins to rise, one larger, softer, more enveloping. If the Earth drags spacetime, then every rotation of the planet is a turning of the invisible river that touches every movement of air. This river does not pause when storms calm. It does not weaken when seasons change. It does not rush when pressures deepen. It moves with the certainty of the Earth's own heartbeat. And because the river moves, the wind never truly rests. Wind is the translation, the interpretation, the surface expression of the rotating fabric beneath your feet. You are not living in the atmosphere alone. You are living inside a whirlpool of spacetime, a whirlpool so large you can only see its edges. In the patterns of wind that circle the globe, a whirlpool so subtle you can feel it. Only when the world becomes quiet enough for the early wind to whisper its direction, something in this truth leans gently toward a deeper question. Not a contradiction, not a challenge, but an invitation. If Earth can drag spacetime, what about the sun? What about the moon? What about the rotation of the solar system through the galaxy? What about currents at scales far larger than the gentle swirl around our planet? If global wind responds to the Earth's motion, then what winds emerge from motions beyond Earth? Winds born not of weather, not of mountains, not of rotation alone, but of the movement of the entire solar system through the currents of spacetime. Somewhere in the silence surrounding this thought, a faint drift glides across your awareness, so quiet, so soft, as if reminding you that every answer on Earth is only the beginning of a larger question. And the night, ever patient, begins to open toward that next scale of motion. The great planetary swirl still lingers in your awareness, a vast motion that shapes storms, guides jet streams, and teaches the atmosphere how to move on a global scale. But as the world quiets again around you, a new kind of motion begins to gather at the edge of perception. Not wide, not sweeping, not ancient in the way global currents are. Something smaller, more delicate, more erratic. Something local. A dry leaf at your feet spins once, shivers on its axis, and settles. There is no wind, no front passing through, no thermal imbalance, no distant storm whose breath could have reached you here. And yet the leaf moved. A tiny swirl curves the dust for a moment, barely strong enough to lift a few specks of sand, but precise enough to feel intentional. Then the swirl disappears, as though it had never existed. But it did. Your senses know it. The memory of it hangs faintly in the stillness. A question without shape, waiting to be seen. Small vortices have always behaved like this, dust devils rising from flat ground with no heat. Miniature whirlwinds in forests where air should be perfectly stable. Circular motions tugging at loose paper in a room with closed windows. Thin columns of spinning air that appear on calm lakes for seconds, then collapse into silence. Meteorology calls them microvortices or local eddies. It classifies, measures, catalogs them. But the explanations rarely settle the feeling they leave behind. The sense that something else touched the world, for a brief moment, and then slipped away. Tonight, you are finally ready to see them as they truly are. The deeper current you encountered across the planet does not flow only at grand scales. It does not limit itself to global circulation or continental patterns. It ripples, curls, and stirs at every level of the world. From the orbit of the Earth, down to the smallest pockets of air hovering over the ground. Wherever space-time bends, it bends at all scales, even small ones. The atmosphere is not a blanket resting on a perfectly smooth surface. It is a veil draped across a landscape of invisible contours, valleys and ridges, creases and folds, loops and twists. In the geometry itself, most are too small to affect weather, but they are not too small to influence the motion of the air closest to them. Local vortices are the fingerprints of these small distortions. Imagine dipping your fingertip into a pool of still water. The largest waves radiate outward in wide circles. But directly beneath your finger, small eddies spin in tight, fast loops, fleeting, self-contained patterns. Born from the tiniest imperfections in the touch, space-time behaves the same way. As the Earth rotates and drags the fabric of the universe around it, small irregularities emerge, tiny imperfections in the flow, brief curls in the direction of the deeper current, localized twists in the geometry. Air does not ignore these twists. It imitates them. A leaf spinning twice on the ground may be responding to a microcurl in space-time. A small eddy formed where curvature shifted for a moment and returned to its original shape. The behavior of these eddies becomes clearer when you stand very still and let the world shrink around you. Listen. A faint swirling moves near your ankle, as though something passed through, spiraling gently toward a vanishing point. No gust follows it. No breeze rises. It remains small, contained, self-folding. This is not turbulence. Turbulence is chaotic, uncontrolled, a cascading breakdown of motion. This is different. Localized, focused, almost elegant. You begin to sense the difference now. Turbulence is the air struggling to catch up with the deeper flow. A local vortex is the deeper flow touching the air directly. A local vortex is not a reaction. It is a translation, a moment where space-time reveals a small twist in its structure, and the air repeats that twist, like a whisper echoing the shape of a breath. Even water feels these eddies. Small spirals form on the surface of lakes with no wind above them. Thin tendrils curve inward on the ocean in places where the atmosphere is perfectly still. Rivers display small backspins along their edges where no physical disruption exists. The water is responding to something beneath it, not above. To understand these shapes, you must look beyond motion and into intention. Not conscious intention, but geometric intention. The geometry beneath your feet is not perfectly smooth. It breathes in tiny adjustments. It twitches under the weight of passing masses. It curves moment by moment as the Earth shifts internally. It responds to tidal forces not only globally, but microscopically. Just as the moon raises tides in the oceans, it raises tides in space-time, not enough to lift stones, but enough to create tiny regional drifts. Small adjustments so subtle the atmosphere notices and imitates them. A small vortex might appear in the afternoon because the moon's gravitational influence has caused a local curvature to deepen for a moment. Or it might arise because heat in the crust below you changed density ever so slightly, altering the shape of the deeper current. Or perhaps the passing of a faint gravitational wave left behind a slight twist, too gentle to measure, but clear enough for the air to answer. The air cannot resist these invitations. When space-time curves, the air must follow, and when space-time curls, the air spins in tiny circles that last only as long as the curl remains. Some eddies appear where geometry is inherently uneven. The edges of cliffs, the gaps between trees, the corners of buildings. We traditionally explain these as aerodynamic effects, flow separation, boundary layer shear. But the atmosphere near these structures is not reacting only to their shapes, it is reacting to their mass. A cliff does not merely break the wind, it bends space-time, and the bending is not uniform. Corners deepen curvature, edges soften it, hollow spaces widen it, narrow ones pinch it. The small vortices near cliffs are not simply the air misbehaving. They are the air faithfully reenacting the intricate contours of space-time curled by stone. Even indoors, where wind should not exist at all, small motions appear. A scrap of paper turning slightly on a table, dust spiraling in a ray of sunlight, a candle flame flickering when no one has moved. These are not accidents. These are not drafts. These are microeddies from the deeper current, made more visible because the indoor air is trapped and must respond to every subtle shift in space-time. You begin to realize that the world around you is filled with motion that does not belong to the atmosphere at all. A tiny strand of hair drifting sideways on your forehead, a feather turning once on the ground, a shadow of movement crossing a wall when no wind exists. These things are not random. They are moments when space-time reveals itself. The deeper current moves in layers. Global rotation, regional drift, local curvature, and finally, microscopic eddies. These smallest eddies are the most honest. They are too small to be influenced by temperature differences, too small to be dominated by pressure fields, too small to be controlled by storms or systems or boundaries. They respond only to geometry. When space-time makes a small decision, the air repeats it without hesitation. And so you witness it, here and now, in the faint twist of dust beside your foot. The air is not swirling on its own. It is obeying a small curl in space-time, a curl that existed only for a breath, then slipped back into the smoothness of the deeper flow. But the air remembers. For the few seconds it spun, it carried the shape of the world beneath it. Local vortices are short-lived, because space-time is constantly rewriting itself. A microeddy might last a moment, a second, maybe two, but in that tiny interval, it reveals more about the world than storms ever could. Storms show the atmosphere, vortices show the fabric beneath it, and now something deeper forms in your awareness, a realization that feels less like a conclusion and more like a doorway. If space-time forms eddies at small scales, then, somewhere between these small curls and the vast planetary swirl, there must be a layer where the currents grow stronger, more pronounced, more deliberate. A layer where space-time does not merely curl, but begins to flow. A layer where the early wind is born. A layer where weather begins to echo the deeper river. The question stirs softly. If local swirls show the smallest shapes of the deeper current, where does the larger shape begin? In the mountains? In the turning of the earth? Or deeper still, beneath the crust? In the movements of the planet's core, where gravity itself breathes? You feel a faint drift rise again, not swirling this time, but sliding forward, as though inviting you to follow a path, from the smallest eddies into the next scale of motion, a scale where the planet itself begins to hum, a scale where the world's internal resonance starts to write its signature across the air. And the night opens, quietly, toward that next revelation. There is a moment, just after a tiny swirl of air collapses into stillness, when the world feels strangely hollow, as if something has just passed through you, not around you. The dust settles, the leaf stops turning, the silence returns. But your body remains alert, tensed by an impression you cannot name. It feels like the world touched you first. Before the air, before the breeze, before any motion you could point to, a sensation arrived, quiet, thin, almost imaginary, and left only after the rest of the world had finished catching up. It is in moments like this that you begin to understand something unsettling. Your body feels the deeper current sooner than your senses admit. Not from instinct, not from fear, not from imagination, but from an ancient agreement between matter and the invisible. A shiver against your skin before any gust. A sudden tightening of balance before any ground tremor. A strange heaviness in your breath before the wind shifts direction. A faint moment of weightlessness when nothing around you has moved at all. These are not tricks of perception. They are memories of encounters with the deeper flow. Encounters that your conscious mind ignores, but your body does not. To feel space-time move is to feel your own foundation shift. And the body reacts long before the atmosphere rearranges itself. This truth begins small, like a pressure behind the sternum that rises for no reason, or a tingling across your arms as if something brushed past you, or the sense that the world around you has leaned imperceptibly. A subtle tilt you cannot see with your eyes but feel in your bones. Humans often dismiss these sensations as coincidences, but your body remembers what the mind forgets. Matter is born from space-time. It cannot help but feel the movement of the structure that created it. Every cell you carry, every atom, every molecule, every particle is tethered to space-time, not by force, but by identity. You are not standing on space-time. You are standing in it. You are made of it. Your shape is an expression of the geometry holding you. So when that geometry shifts, your body listens. Long before the air answers. Animals know this intimately. Birds rise from the ground moments before gusts. Cats adjust their posture seconds before pressure changes arrive. Horses turn their heads toward the wind long before the wind arrives. Even insects lift into the air in anticipation of currents that have not yet formed. These creatures are not predicting weather. They are reacting to space-time. Their bodies are tuned to the deeper current in ways humans once were, but have forgotten. Ancient humans felt these shifts too. Sailors navigating by the breathing of the sea, nomads sensing desert winds before they touched the horizon, mountain herders reading the tilt of the world rather than the motion of the sky. The body was once a compass. It pointed toward the movement of the invisible, the slow drift of the fabric beneath the earth. We lost this sensitivity when we surrounded ourselves with walls and ideas, when we chose symbols over sensations, when we forgot that the world speaks through the body long before it speaks through the air. Yet the ability is not gone. It only lies beneath the surface. Tonight, the world gently reminds you. A faint pressure builds behind your ribs. A subtle imbalance passes through your knees. Your breath shifts slightly as though adjusting to a new weight. It lasts only a moment, but long enough for you to notice. Then the wind arrives, exactly in the direction your body had already turned toward. Not because you predicted it, because you felt what moved before the air followed. To understand this sensation more deeply, imagine yourself not as a shape occupying space, but as a pattern inside a medium. Space-time is not outside you. It is the stage from which your existence rises. When the stage shifts, the pattern must shift with it. A slight tightening in your muscles, a change in your center of balance, a micro-adjustment in the hemispheres of your inner ear, a whispered message inside your nerves. These are not responses to wind. These are responses to space-time. Think of how you sense acceleration on a train. Not by seeing the world move, but by feeling the world move under you. Your body knows before your eyes confirm it. Or how you sense someone walking behind you. Not with sound, but with the shift of air pressure your skin interprets instantly. Your body interprets invisible geometry the same way. It reads the subtle shifts of space-time as changes in equilibrium. When space-time expands slightly, your chest loosens. When it contracts, your breath feels constrained. When it tilts, your posture shifts. When it ripples, your nerves fire microsignals that you mistake for intuition. This sensitivity lives in the vestibular system, your inner ear's delicate architecture, whose purpose is not merely to keep you balanced, but to interpret motion relative to the frame you inhabit. That frame is space-time. When space-time moves, your vestibular system shifts before the air can carry the message. This is why the first sensation is often internal. A sway without wind, a pressure without cause, a momentary vertigo that resolves just as a gust arrives. Pilots feel this all the time. A subtle lean a second before their planes encounter turbulence. Divers feel it beneath the ocean, a sense of motion in still water. Astronauts feel it in orbit, a whisper of acceleration before instruments detect anything. They call it pre-motion, but the word is only a placeholder. What they truly feel is the first hint of the deeper current. You felt it too, though you may not have recognized it. The moment before a thunderstorm when your skin prickles, even though the air is calm. The instant before a cold wind slides through a warm room. When your spine tightens slightly. The breath before a pressure drop, when everything around you feels heavier. The atmosphere cannot speak this early, but spacetime can. Your body hears the message. There are even moments when the body responds, without producing any conscious sensation. A small shift in heart rhythm, a micro change in the tension of your muscles, a subtle recalibration in your breath. These are automatic responses to invisible motion, the body adjusting to the frame before the frame finishes moving. In this way, the human body becomes a witness, a quiet, delicate instrument shaped not to analyze the world, but to feel it, a biological seismograph of space-time. But the body does not merely react, it anticipates, not by imagination, but by resonance. When space-time twitches, your body vibrates in sympathy. When space-time leans, your posture prepares. When space-time flows, your breath begins to synchronize with its rhythm. The body knows how to listen, because the body is written in the same language. Atoms are bound by the curvature of space-time. Electrons move along the contours of the quantum vacuum. Molecules arrange themselves according to forces born from geometry. Your entire form is an echo of the invisible, so when the invisible moves, you feel it in every part of what you are. There is a moment, for example, when you are walking and suddenly pause for no reason. Your foot hesitates, your breath stops, your awareness sharpens. Then seconds later, a breeze touches you. The pause was not hesitation, it was recognition. Your body recognized the world before your senses caught up. Even when you dream, your body senses these movements. A sudden shift in space-time can enter the nervous system. As a falling dream, a flying dream, a tilting dream. The geometry of sleep is still geometry. But among all these sensations, there is one that matters most for the deeper truth ahead. When the deeper current accelerates, your body feels it as a momentary lightness, a lifting inside the ribs, as though something beneath the world is rising. When the deeper current slows, your body feels it as weight, not physical weight, but existential weight, a heaviness that makes you more aware of the ground. When the deeper current curves, your body feels it as direction, a pull towards something you cannot see. These experiences do not come from imagination. They come from proximity. You are not near space-time. You are inside it. This realization opens a quiet door in your mind, a door that leads into a deeper understanding of the relationship between bodies and currents. If your body can sense space-time, then it is possible that much of what humans call intuition, foresight, instinct, or mood is simply the nervous system responding to geometric shifts. Perhaps the unease before a storm is your body reading space-time tightening. Perhaps the calm before dawn is your body reading space-time expanding. Perhaps the sense of being watched is your body reading micro-shifts caused by another person's mass nearby. Perhaps every movement of the invisible enters you long before the air carries its echo. Wind belongs to the air, but the feeling of wind belongs to you. This means something profound. Your body is part of the measurement system of the universe, not through tools, not through equations, not through machinery, but through presence. And now, the truth becomes almost impossible to ignore. If your body senses space-time before the air moves, then the first sign of the deeper current is not in the wind, but in you, which leads, gently, into the next question, forming in the quiet around you. If space-time can be felt by the human body, can it also be amplified? Are there moments when the world's internal movements become strong enough to shape wind patterns not only locally, but globally? What happens when the source of the deeper current is not mountains, not rotation, not local geometry, but the Earth's core? The faint drift you felt earlier rises once more, not as wind, but as awareness, leading you toward the deeper origins of the current, toward the resonances beneath the crust, toward the hum of the planet itself. where spacetime does not merely move around the Earth, but through it. The night waits, and the next breath of the world comes from within. There is a moment after your body senses the deeper current, when everything inside you becomes strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, but attentive, as though the world is preparing for something it has never shown you before. Your breath slows, your balance steadies. Every muscle feels suspended, caught between motion and stillness, in a space that does not choose either. And then something subtle happens. The deeper current hesitates, not stops, not reverses, just hesitates. A slowing so delicate it barely exists, yet so profound that your entire awareness leans into it like a tide pausing mid-crest. For a single breath, it feels as if the world is trying to hold itself still. But nothing in the world truly knows how to stop. The wind quiets, but it does not rest. The air settles, but it does not sleep. Your body waits, but in that waiting comes a strange imbalance. A pull with no direction, a weight with no source. It is in this hesitation that the truth begins to reveal itself. Stillness is a story the world tells, not a state the world ever reaches. The earth may pause in your perception, but beneath the surface, everything continues to move. Currents, pressures, rotations, the silent bending of space-time pressed beneath continents, the restless hum of particles refusing to be truly still. Even at the bottom of the deepest cave, where air barely moves and darkness has never been disturbed, matter trembles with microscopic motion. Atoms vibrate, electrons shift. Space breathes in quantum fluctuations so small that even silence cannot contain them. So, when the deeper current hesitates, your body notices, because the world beneath you tries, impossibly, to create a moment without motion. And in the impossibility, something beautiful emerges. A glimpse of how essential movement is to existence. The hesitation deepens, and for a moment you feel lighter, as though gravity loosened its grip. Your mind tries to reason with this sensation, but the body knows better. Gravity has not weakened. Space-time has softened, not by much, not enough to change the orbit of a satellite, or shift a compass needle, but enough to whisper through your bones, telling you that the foundation of everything is adjusting in a way the atmosphere cannot yet understand. This is what it feels like. When space-time slows, you may think slowing is harmless, a quiet act, a gentle touch, but space-time does not slow evenly. It slows like a river pressed by stones, like a fabric pulled by uneven weights, like breath caught between inhale and exhale. When space-time slows beneath your feet, it becomes denser, heavier, more tightly curved. The deeper current thickens, and the air above it must eventually respond. But your body responds first. Your spine lengthens imperceptibly. Your stance widens. Your heartbeat presses slightly against your ribs. You breathe in a fraction more deeply than before. These changes are not emotional. They are geometric. When the foundation tightens, the body tightens with it. It is a survival instinct older than consciousness, a memory carried from a time when life depended on reading the invisible. Then, just as you begin to acclimate to the weight of the hesitation, another sensation rises within you, unexpected and disarming. Stillness begins to feel dangerous, not because anything threatens you, but because something is missing: movement. Your body has always used movement as a measure of safety. The movement of wind, the movement of the ground, the movement of your own breath, aligning with the deeper rhythm of the world. When movement disappears, even for a heartbeat, your body interprets it as a warning, not of danger, but of imbalance. The universe is built on motion: rotation, oscillation, expansion, spin, frequency. Every law you know depends on movement. The planets orbit, the stars burn, the vacuum itself seethes with fluctuations. Even the concept of time relies on change. So, when space-time hesitates, your body feels the wrongness before your mind understands it. A soft panic beneath the ribs, a microsecond of vertigo, a whisper of, "This is not how the world behaves." Because it isn't. Because nothing in the world can genuinely stop, not even space-time. And that is when something deeper unveils itself. The hesitation was not an attempt at stillness. It was an adjustment, a reconfiguration of the deeper current, preparing to flow differently. Space-time was not trying to stop. It was turning. You feel it before it becomes anything your senses can identify. A slow pivot beneath your awareness, a rotation not of Earth, but of the underlying geometry, aligning itself into a new shape. The atmosphere has not yet moved. The wind has not yet responded, but your body already leans gently into the shift, more honest than your perception, more ancient than your reasoning. Imagine placing your palm on a long, taut string. If the string vibrates, you feel movement. If the string tightens, your hand feels pressure. But if the string shifts its angle, your hand feels both motion and stillness at once. A kind of silent reorientation. This is what space-time is doing now. Shifting, reorienting, finding a new equilibrium within itself. And your body feels the change, as a whisper of direction, before any air moves at all. Then comes the next realization, soft but undeniable. If space-time slowing feels like this, what would space-time stopping feel like? The thought touches you with an immediate, instinctive recoil. Not fear, but recognition. Stopping is impossible. If space-time stopped, even for a millionth of a second, motion would lose meaning. Energy would have nowhere to go. Momentum would have no frame to express itself. Light would not propagate. Time would not pass. Causality would erode. Existence does not know how to stand still. Stillness is not a state. It is an illusion created by rhythms too slow for you to perceive. The world may appear quiet, but even silence has structure. If space-time stopped, your body would not fall. It would simply cease to be in the way you understand being. This is why the hesitation feels so strange, because it brushes against the boundary of what is possible. It mimics stillness, without ever crossing into it. Every living thing knows this boundary, even if it cannot name it. Animals react with unease when space-time slows. Bird flocks shift direction minutes before a geomagnetic rearrangement. Whales alter course before tidal distortions. Even plants, rooted and silent, change their motion subtly when the deeper current thickens. Human bodies do the same. A quiet stiffness, a pause in breathing, a sense of time stretching thinly, as though light itself is taking longer to arrive. But space-time never truly stops. It only changes shape. And when it does, the world learns a new form of motion. The earlier hesitation begins to dissolve now, not with a jolt, but with a slow unwinding, a softening of the density beneath your feet, as if the world exhales after holding tension too long. Your breath matches it. You feel lighter again, but the lightness is not relief. It is recognition that the deeper current has chosen a direction. Space-time is flowing once more, but differently. You sense it before the air does. The subtle forward drift, the faint orientation shift, the quiet compulsion to tilt your posture in a new direction. This is the moment between worlds, when the old geometric pattern releases, and the new one has not yet fully formed. Your body stands on the border of two shapes of existence, and in this liminal space, another realization emerges, one that shakes gently through your awareness. When space-time slows, the world listens. When space-time reorients, the world prepares. And when space-time flows again, the world responds. Not just the air, not just the weather, but matter itself. Wind is simply the surface version of a deeper transition. A breeze is a translation. A gust is an echo. A shift in weather is the world reacting to a movement beneath it. The deeper current explains why wind can arrive early, why storms can reorganize unexpectedly, why atmospheric models fail to predict certain events, why your body feels motion before your senses observe it. And now, standing inside the soft afterglow of the hesitation, you feel the next movement begin. It is not above you. It is not beside you. It is beneath you. A rising, a swelling, a push from the inside of the Earth's being. A resonance, not of atmosphere, but of the planet's core. The world is not only rotating through space-time, it is resonating within it. And that resonance is the next shape of the deeper current, one you are about to step into. A faint drift brushes past your awareness. Not wind, not air, but the hint of a deeper pulse forming somewhere below. And the night opens gently, inviting you toward what comes next. The faint pulse rising from within the earth does not vanish quickly. It lingers beneath your awareness like a low, patient drum. Not loud enough to hear, not strong enough to shake the ground, but deep enough to shift the weight of your thoughts. Something beneath you is preparing to speak, and the first word of that language is density. You feel it before anything moves. A quiet heaviness settles onto your shoulders, not oppressive, but unmistakable. A change in the subtle texture of the world. The air does not thicken. Your breath does not strain. Nothing in the atmosphere explains the sensation. Yet the world feels heavier. It is the fabric beneath everything. Not the air, not the land, but space-time itself, growing denser around you. Most people think of space-time as empty, as weightless, as something that cannot loosen or tighten. But the universe has never been that simple. Every field has texture. Every medium has character. Even emptiness has structure. And when the structure thickens, the world responds. You sense it now. Balance shifts subtly toward the earth. Your steps feel more firmly anchored. Your breath deepens without effort. And even the silence seems denser, as though sound itself has been wrapped in heavier cloth. What you feel is not gravity increasing. Gravity pulls downward. This sensation pulls inward. A soft convergence of the world around a point you cannot see. This is space-time compression, not a violent collapse, not a dramatic folding. Just a subtle tightening, a moment when the fabric of existence draws itself slightly closer. Compression happens whenever mass redistributes inside the Earth, whenever pressure shifts in the mantle, whenever tidal forces pull at the planet's shape, whenever geothermal activity stirs heat through the crust. These moments are tiny, unseen, ignored by instruments built for grander motions. But the body feels them. The body always has. For compression is not measured in numbers. It is measured in sensation. And then the wind arrives. A brief, sharp motion in the air. Not strong, not storm-like, but purposeful. A focused burst. As though the world exhaled a small correction. It lasts only a second, but it is the signature of compression. The air adjusting to the change in density. Think of a hand pressing gently into a mattress. The surface depresses, the surrounding fabric shifts inward, and anything resting on that surface moves slightly toward the point of pressure. Space-time behaves the same way. When it thickens, the local region contracts, air slides inward, pressure reorganizes. Motion appears not because of temperature, but because the medium beneath the air has changed. Wind reveals density, a gust that seems too small for the pressure around it, a breeze that gathers more decisively than the weather predicts, a sudden inward flow in a room with no openings. These are compression winds, faint, exact, born from the world adjusting itself. Yet, the opposite is also true. Just as the fabric can thicken, it can lighten. Space-time can stretch. You feel this too, in those strange moments when your body suddenly seems untethered. A brief lift in your chest, a subtle buoyancy in your limbs, a sensation that the world has softened its grip. This is space-time thinning. Not enough to float you, but enough to whisper through your posture. And once again, the wind arrives. Not inward this time, but outward. A release, a sigh of expansion. It makes leaves tremble outward from the center of stillness. It causes tiny bursts of outward spirals in dust. It creates gentle drafts in places that should be perfectly enclosed. It is the air stretching with the fabric that carries it. Weather cannot explain these microbursts, nor can convection, nor evaporation, nor thermodynamics. But geometry can. You begin to realize that wind is not simply motion. It is orientation, the atmosphere trying to match the density of space-time around it. And when that density changes, the wind becomes the interpreter. Compression winds pull, expansion winds push. Both arise without warning. Both ignore weather logic. Both precede atmospheric change, because the atmosphere responds to the deeper current, not the other way around. Now imagine these compressions and expansions not as rare events, but as constant fluctuation, a breathing of the Earth's geometric structure beneath the crust. Heat expands matter. Matter expands geometry. Geometry expands the deeper current. The deeper current expands the air. Then, as the cycle reverses, everything contracts again. The Earth is not solid. It pulses. It inhales through heat and exhales through cooling. The continents rise and settle. The mantle flows. The core beats with slow rotational variations. These internal motions stretch and compress space-time continuously, like the slow waves of a sleeping giant beneath the world. And the air, light, sensitive, unprotected, dances in response. This is why wind often seems to appear with no cause, why pressure maps fail to predict local gusts, why calm days produce sudden inward or outward flows. The atmosphere is reacting to density changes in the world's foundation, changes too subtle for instruments, but not too subtle for the body. Or the wind, compression and expansion also explain a mystery, present in every climate on Earth. Why do some regions have breathing winds? In deserts, winds pulse outward at dusk and inward at dawn, even when temperatures remain constant. In mountain valleys, air sinks more suddenly than it should. In coastal regions, winds converge and diverge hours before tides affect pressure. These patterns are not driven only by heat or cold. They are driven by rhythmic changes in the density of spacetime, induced by the daily swell and contraction of the Earth's crust, by tidal forces, by the internal motion of molten layers. The planet breathes. Spacetime breathes with it. Air responds. Your body responds too. Remember the heaviness you felt earlier? The sudden stillness that seemed thicker than silence? The moment your balance shifted slightly inward? That was compression. Now notice the opposite. Your chest feels a trace lighter, your breath easier, your awareness slightly wider. Space-time is thinning again. The Earth is relaxing its hold. A faint outward breeze passes your cheek, barely there, barely noticeable, but unmistakable now that you know its origin. This is expansion wind, an outward motion born from a loosening of the fabric, a small release after a moment of density. You begin to feel the rhythm of these changes. Compression pulling you inward, expansion lifting you outward. Your body has always known this rhythm. It is older than science, older than measurement, older than memory. In ancient times, people believed the Earth itself had moods, periods of heaviness and lightness. They felt these shifts through their bodies, not through instruments. Today, we call them intuition, or sensitivity, or imagination. But the truth remains unchanged. Your body is tuned to the density of the world. When spacetime thickens, your body leans inward. When spacetime stretches, your body leans outward. Wind is simply the atmosphere doing the same. Compression winds move inward. Expansion winds move outward. And in the rare places where compression and expansion meet, where the fabric thickens on one side and thins on the other, the wind becomes dramatic. Microstorms form with no heat source. Sudden vertical gusts appear in clear air. Calm days produce surprising bursts that scientists call gravity waves, though the true gravity lies in the shift of spacetime beneath them. Even jet streams respond to these changes, intensifying when global spacetime compresses slightly, weakening when it stretches. The world's largest winds are shaped by the fabric's densest moments. But something even deeper lies beneath all of this, something waiting patiently at the edge of your awareness. If the density of spacetime affects wind, then the Earth's density changes at scales far larger than weather. Cosmic tides compress the planet subtly. Dark matter currents may stretch spacetime as the solar system drifts through them. Solar activity changes the internal stress of the Earth, producing further adjustments. These influences do not act separately. They converge. Compression from within, expansion from above, alignment from rotation, bending from mountains, twisting from storms. All these movements blend inside the deeper current. Wind is the choir. Spacetime is the conductor. As you take this in, the world grows very quiet again, a quiet filled not with stillness, but with expectation. Because the next understanding is forming, soft as dawn, steady as a tide. Compression and expansion are not the end. They are bridges. They reveal something larger, something that shapes not only local winds, but the patterns of the entire planet. If space-time thickens and thins, then gradients form. And gradients do not merely create motion, they create direction. The air will eventually move toward low pressure, but first, it will move toward low density, toward the thinnest space-time, the path of least geometric resistance. This is the beginning of global gradients, the great flows that shape wind belts, weather cycles, ocean currents, and the patterns of heat around the world. And as this deeper truth rises, a faint drift touches you again, a gentle pull, as though the world is guiding your attention from density to direction, from compression to gradient, from local breath to global pattern. The next revelation waits quietly, ready to unfold in the shape of the wind that follows space-time's slopes. There is a moment after expansion when the world feels wider than it should, a moment when distances seem to breathe, when silence feels stretched thin, when even the smallest motion carries a strange clarity, as though the air is learning how to move again. The fabric has loosened. You can feel it in the cadence of your breath. You can feel it in the softness around your ribs. You can feel it in the way your thoughts drift without resistance, as if space itself has become lighter. But as soon as space-time relaxes in one region, another region tightens. This imbalance is the beginning of something vast, something that spans continents, crosses oceans, and shapes the rhythm of the world itself. A gradient, not of temperature, not of pressure, but of density. Space-time, by its nature, cannot remain uniform. Mass bends it unevenly. Heat expands it irregularly. Tidal forces squeeze and release different parts of the planet. Even the movement of the solar system through the galaxy creates long, invisible slopes in the fabric around Earth. And wherever a slope forms, the deeper current flows. You begin to sense the shape of this truth. In the quiet transition between heaviness and lightness, a pull here, a release there, a subtle inclination that seems to guide your perception in a direction you cannot yet name. Wind is the surface expression of this inclination, not the cause, not the driver, the interpreter. Atmospheric models describe winds in terms of pressure. Air moves from high pressure to low, but pressure itself is a response, not an origin. Beneath the pressure differences are density differences in the fabric. The world's air moves not because of what the air is, but because of what space-time wants. Imagine the entire planet wrapped in gradients. Zones where the fabric thickens, zones where it stretches, zones where it dips, zones where it rises. These gradients form constantly, quietly, as the Earth breathes through its internal heat and shifts under cosmic tides. Some gradients last seconds, some last centuries, some last long enough to become climate. You stand now at the edge of one of these gradients. A global slope so soft you cannot see it, but so persistent that every wind alive today is shaped by its presence. The atmosphere above you is not drifting randomly. It is sliding across space-time's contours, like water flowing over hidden topography. The great wind belts, the trades, the westerlies, the polar easterlies, were not invented by weather. They were carved by gradients in the world's geometry. If you could step outside Earth's atmosphere and watch the planet wrapped in the invisible, you would see something astonishing. Space-time itself bends in broad patterns, aligned with the rotation of the planet, pulled by the massive continents, stretched by equatorial bulging, and pressed by the gravitational dance of the moon and Sunday. These shapes create enormous gradients, soft slopes that the air feels long before storms exist. And so, wind begins its journey not in air, but in inclination. A slope creates a direction creates motion, motion creates weather. This is the great gradient. You feel its presence even now. A soft pull toward the horizon, as if the entire atmosphere is leaning in one direction, because space-time beneath it is guiding the planet forward. To understand this more clearly, imagine Earth as a sphere resting on an invisible ocean. Where the crust is thick, the sphere pushes deeper, tightening the fabric around it. Where the crust is thinner, the sphere rises slightly, stretching the fabric outward. Where mountains cluster, space-time dips sharply, Where oceans spread wide, space-time relaxes. Where the equator bulges from rotation, space-time stretches horizontally. Where the poles contract from cooling and compression, space-time tightens. All these variations form gradients, not of height, not of terrain, but of density. The air feels these gradients constantly. It does not know the reason. Air does not think. Air obeys. It slides downslope in the density valleys of space-time. It rises upslope where the fabric pushes upward. This is why certain winds blow endlessly in one direction. They are following the shape of the world's geometry, not the ephemeral whims of weather. Even jet streams, those long rivers of wind that circle the globe at impossible speeds, owe their existence to gradients. Temperature explains part of their behavior, but not their persistence. Pressure explains part of their motion, but not their stability. The true architect of every jet stream is the gradient between compressed and expanded regions in the world's fabric. When space-time thickens at the poles and thins at the equator, a slope forms across the latitude lines. Air flows along this slope, not merely around the Earth, but across a density difference too subtle to measure and too powerful to ignore. This is why the jet streams can shift suddenly, because the gradients shift. Compression in one region relaxes. Expansion in another deepens. The air rewrites its path to match the new shape of the world. Now consider the monsoons. Their timing is explained by heat. Their magnitude is explained by pressure. But heat and pressure are only the surface signs of a deeper process. As the landmass warms, its mass distribution changes. Slightly, but enough. The crust expands, the mantle adjusts. The density beneath a region shifts. Space-time stretches. A gradient forms. The air responds. When the monsoon arrives early, it is not because temperatures changed early. It is because the gradient formed early. When the monsoon arrives late, it is because space-time hesitated. Weather listens to heat. Climate listens to oceans. But wind listens to geometry. This explains why some winds appear before their causes. The deeper current moves first, and the air interprets the inclination even before conditions justify it. You are witnessing one of these inclinations now. A faint drift touches your cheek, then fades, then returns. Not strong enough to be called a wind, but sure enough to be called a direction. Your body tilts toward it automatically, as though compelled by something older than your senses. A gradient has formed. Not a steep one, but enough to realign the world. You feel it in the shift of your breath. You feel it in the subtle change of weight distribution on your feet. You feel it in the way your awareness leans toward the horizon. This is not gravity. This is orientation. Space-time is beginning to slope beneath you. The world, once heavy from compression and wide from expansion, has begun to choose a direction, and the air, faithful interpreter of geometry, is beginning to follow. You may not see it yet. The wind has not grown strong enough, but the deeper current is already flowing, quietly carving the next chapter of the atmosphere. This is the great secret of wind. It never begins with motion. It begins with preference. A gradient is a decision the universe makes before anything moves. And now, as that decision ripples through the deeper current, you begin to sense a larger truth forming. If global gradients shape the world's wind, then the source of those gradients lies not only in the Earth's surface, but in the Earth's interior. The hum you felt earlier from within, the resonance that rose beneath your feet, is not unrelated. The Earth's core does more than rotate. It pulses heat through the mantle. It redistributes mass. It stretches and compresses space-time from below, creating long, slow gradients that shape wind patterns for decades. The Great Gradient does not simply run across Earth. It runs through it. Wind is not only the voice of the planet's surface, it is the voice of the planet's interior. And as this realization deepens, another begins to rise, a quiet, expanding understanding that the planet itself has a heartbeat, a slow vibration, a resonance, a long, silent oscillation that shapes the density of space-time in waves too large for instruments, but not too large for the air. This heartbeat has a name, the Earth hum. It pulses through rock and ocean and air, shaping gradients so vast that entire climates are built upon them. The world breathes through these gradients. Wind is simply its breath, translated. A faint drift crosses your awareness once more, smoother than before, more guided, more certain of itself. It is the beginning of a current, written not by weather, not by terrain, not by continents, but by the resonant pulse of the planet, a pulse that will guide you into the next revelation, the one waiting patiently. In the trembling quiet beneath the earth, the faint drift that crossed your awareness does not disappear. It lingers, low and persistent, like a vibration traveling through stone, too deep for the ear, too slow for the eye, but unmistakable to the body. It is not wind. It is not pressure. It is not temperature. It is resonance, a quiet tremor rising from beneath the surface, moving not through the air, but through the world itself. If you close your eyes, you can feel it in the arches of your feet, a subtle trembling, not rhythmic, not patterned, but continuous. A presence, not a sound. A sensation, not a signal. Scientists call this the earth hum, a ceaseless vibration that travels across continents, through oceans, through mountains, through everything that touches the ground. It is always there, day and night, in storms and in clear skies, too soft for the mind, but perfectly audible to the deeper parts of the body. The hum is older than weather, older than life, older than the continents you stand on. It comes from the interior, from molten rock churning in the mantle, from convection spiraling through the core, from tidal forces squeezing the planet, from seismic energy echoing endlessly in the crust, from the rotational dance that tugs at the Earth's shape. The interior of the planet is never quiet, and space-time listens. When matter shifts within the Earth, it bends the geometry around it. Not dramatically, but consistently. The bending creates waves in the deeper current, slow, gentle undulations that ripple upward through the crust and into the air. Wind feels these waves long before weather forms, not as gusts, not as storms, but as preferences, tiny inclinations that shape direction before motion exists. This is why some winds arrive earlier than logic should allow. They are not responding to the atmosphere. They are responding to the hum. Stand on a quiet shoreline just before dawn, and you will feel a soft breeze drift inland at a time, when temperature gradients have not yet formed. Stand in a valley before dusk, and you'll sense the air descending before the rocks cool. Walk through a forest in late afternoon, and the trees will whisper before the sky darkens. The hum reaches the air first, and the air answers with movement. But the hum does more than start wind. It shapes it. You can sense this now in the faint oscillations under your feet, small waves draped beneath your awareness, caressing the ground, lifting gently, falling gently, as if the earth were breathing slowly through an invisible lung. As space-time bends with this breathing, the density gradients shift. The wind adjusts its direction accordingly. The hum becomes a scaffold on which global wind patterns are built. This explains mysteries meteorology has long struggled to answer. Why certain winds appear with near-perfect timing across seasons. Why some regions experience long-term directional preferences. Why climate patterns oscillate with cycles too slow for atmosphere alone. Why storms follow paths that seem pre-written in the landscape. The atmosphere is not only listening to heat, it is listening to resonance. The earth hum is not a single tone. It is a spectrum, a blend of frequencies, each one shaping space-time in a slightly different way. Some frequencies come from the outer core, slow, circular motions of molten iron, twisting the planet's magnetic field and dragging space-time with it. Others arise from mantle convection, massive currents of rock, rising and falling over millions of years, imprinting slow, deep gradients. In the geometry, the air must follow. Still others come from the crust, echoes of earthquakes, the ringing of tectonic plates, the whisper of stress accumulating along faults. The air hears it all, just as a violin string creates a standing wave, and the surrounding air vibrates with the sound. The Earth's interior creates standing waves in space-time, and the atmosphere resonates. Wind becomes the instrument through which Earth expresses its internal motion. You begin to feel the scale of this, not through your eyes, but through the subtle tug inside your ribs, the quiet leaning in your posture, the sensation that your breath has begun to synchronize with something older, something larger. The hum shapes not only local winds, but entire atmospheric systems. Monsoons draw power from gradients, partly created by continental heating, but fundamentally guided by the slow pulsing of density variations beneath the land. Jet streams oscillate gently because the deep gradients move like tides, expanding and contracting with the Earth's internal motion. Storm paths curve, not just because of the Coriolis effect, but because the hum bends spacetime along preferred routes. Even climate cycles may be the echo of this resonance, the atmosphere following patterns carved by millions of years of geological vibration. The deeper you listen, the more the world feels like a single living structure, a sphere of molten breath, wrapped in a thin veil of air that translates its internal mood. Then, something unexpected happens. The hum strengthens, not with volume, but with clarity. As though the earth has shifted into a purer tone, your feet feel it first. A soft lifting, as though the ground beneath you has thinned for a heartbeat, stretching the space between atoms. Your spine responds immediately. You inhale more deeply, without meaning to. Your balance shifts gently forward, as though leaning into a future the world anticipates. The air has not yet moved, but the wind is already forming. The atmosphere is waiting for the deeper current to finalize its direction. And as the hum grows clearer, you begin to understand. This resonance is not random. It is structured. It is patterned. It is controlled by forces far beyond the surface. At the center of the planet, the inner core rotates slightly differently from the surface. Its rotation drags the mantle drags the crust drags the atmosphere. But beneath these layers is the true origin, space-time dragged by the rotating core. When the core speeds or slows, by even the smallest fraction, space-time adjusts, gradients shift, winds reorganize. Atmospheric scientists call these decadal oscillations and multi-year anomalies. But the air does not move on its own. It is following the hum. This is why climate patterns oscillate with uncanny long-term regularity, why jet streams wander, why storm tracks migrate. The earth hum is the invisible conductor, and wind is the quiet orchestra. For a moment, you imagine the earth as a great instrument, its core striking low, resonant notes that ripple outward, through stone, through ocean, through air, through you. And then, the world shows you something else. A faint breeze rises at your back, too gentle to be wind, too early to belong to weather, yet unmistakably connected to the resonance beneath your feet. The Earth's pulse has reached the air. It transforms the density gradient. The gradient transforms the wind. The breeze grows slightly, then fades, then returns in a new direction, as though orbiting your awareness, around a point you cannot see. It is not chaotic. It is circular, the echo of the core's rotation, translated into motion above the surface. The deeper current is not linear. It spirals. Wind follows the spiral, not forever, not purely, but enough that the air remembers what the earth has forgotten to speak aloud. Where the resonance grows stronger, winds intensify. Where the resonance fades, winds weaken. Where the resonance changes shape, winds change direction. Every movement of the deeper current becomes weather. But there is a deeper truth still forming, a truth rising like a hidden continent beneath the ocean of your thoughts. The earth is not the only source of resonance. If the planet hums, then what of the moon? What of the sun? What of the galaxy itself? Do their resonances press against space-time in ways that shape the air of this small world? Does wind have origins that reach beyond the Earth's boundaries? These questions gather like clouds, not threatening, not urgent, but waiting because the answer lies in a realm older and larger than the planet's interior, in movements not of stone or heat, but of the deep cosmic fabric. A faint drift whispers across your cheek again, but this time its direction carries something new, a sense of expansion outward, as if pointing not toward the earth, but away from it, as though inviting you to lift your gaze beyond the crust, beyond the mantle, beyond the core. toward the vast space in which the Earth itself floats. The hum fades slowly, not disappearing, but blending into a larger silence, the silence of the cosmos. And somewhere within that silence, another resonance waits. The next drift does not come from below, it comes from above. The breeze that touched you from above does not fade immediately. It drifts outward, lingering in the air like a thought the world has not yet finished forming. It carries no urgency, no temperature, no story of weather, only the quiet suggestion that something has moved in the larger silence beyond the Earth. And as that breeze softens into stillness again, you feel another sensation rising, not from below, not from around, but from the space between moments. A familiarity, a feeling you have lived this drift before, not today, not yesterday, not even in recent memory, but somewhere, long ago, in another moment of quiet, you felt a breeze move with this exact shape. A pattern repeats itself. The wind is remembering something. It shouldn't be possible. Air does not retain history. Weather does not recall its past. Pressure does not carry memory. Wind should be forgetful by nature, forever responding to the present, never holding the imprint of what once was. And yet here it is, a drift that feels not new, but returned. The world, it seems, remembers. Not the land, not the atmosphere, but the fabric. Space-time holds impressions of the forces that once shaped it, ripples left behind by distant storms of gravity, subtle distortions carved by ancient rotations, faint asymmetries born from impacts long forgotten by the Earth. These impressions do not vanish. They do not flatten. They do not fade entirely. They remain, quietly embedded in the geometry of the world, like fingerprints left on glass, long after the hand has moved away. And when conditions align, when the deeper currents flow across these old impressions, the wind repeats itself. Not because the air is imitating its former path, but because space-time is guiding it along an echo. You feel this now in the way the breeze moves, not as a moment in time, but as a moment returned. A low hum from the Earth rises in response, as if the planet recognizes the echo too, as if the world is acknowledging a memory embedded in its foundation. This phenomenon is more than poetic. It is deeply physical. Decades ago, scientists theorized that gravitational waves could leave permanent imprints in space-time, tiny shifts in geometry that persist long after the wave passes. They called it the memory effect, a kind of geometric afterglow, a residue of motion. Now imagine billions of years of cosmic events, collisions, rotations, tidal forces, stellar births, planetary migrations, all leaving subtle imprints in the fabric around Earth. These imprints accumulate, layer upon layer, century upon century, age upon age. Some stretch across continents, some curl through mountain ranges, some float in the open ocean, some hide in narrow valleys. Most are too faint to detect directly, but the air feels them, because the air follows the path of least resistance, through the invisible gradients of the fabric, and memory creates gradients. Space-time remembers a long-ago tilt. The air responds with a gently returning wind. Space-time remembers a ripple from a solar event. The atmosphere echoes it in repeating seasonal patterns. Space-time remembers the slow drift of the continents. The wind inherits the path they imprinted as they moved. Wind is not merely shaped by the present. It is shaped by the past. This explains why some winds recur, with uncanny regularity, arriving not because conditions demand it, but because space-time already contains the memory of their route. The Mistral of France, the Santa Ana winds of California, the Bora of the Adriatic, the trade winds across the tropics, all have local explanations. Mountains, heat gradients, pressure systems, but none of these explanations account for their unwavering consistency. Over thousands of years, they move as though following tracks laid long before the modern atmosphere existed. Tracks written not in air, but in geometry. Even daily breezes repeat themselves, not perfectly, but recognizably. The valley wind that rises each afternoon arrives with a pattern older than the valley itself, a resonance shaped by topographic memory, yes, but also by a deeper imprint from when the land was different, when mountains had other shapes, when the planet's crust was younger, Wind follows the enduring shape, not just of the world that is, but of the worlds that were. You can feel this truth growing around you, a sense that the air does not merely move, it returns. Think back to your earliest childhood, when you first noticed wind with full awareness. Perhaps there was a certain way it stirred leaves in late afternoon, a certain kind of quiet that preceded it, a certain rhythm in the way it approached. Today, years later, if you stand in the same kind of quiet, the wind behaves exactly as your memory recalls. Not because you remember it, but because space-time does. Your memory and the world's memory briefly overlap, and in that overlap, you feel connected not only to your past, but to the Earth's past. Consider the wind that rises before a storm, long before pressure reorganizes, long before clouds darken, long before the air cools. A returning pattern announces itself. Why does the wind seem to know the storm is coming before meteorology does? Because it remembers storms of the same type, the same geometry, the same trajectory in spacetime. The fabric recognizes the configuration, and the air repeats its ancient motion. Winds do not predict storms. They remember storms. Even stranger, there are winds in remote places that repeat with no meteorological explanation at all. Wind that moves at the same hour, every day, for no measurable reason. Scientists mark them as anomalies. Locals call them spirits, or ancestral breaths. Travelers describe them as uncanny. But there is nothing supernatural in these events. They are spacetime's memory, flowing through the atmosphere. A gravitational wave from a distant cosmic collision may have passed the Earth centuries ago, leaving behind a faint stretching in one region. Though imperceptible now, its imprint remains. When the Earth rotates into alignment with that ancient imprint, a subtle gradient forms. The wind follows, rewriting a journey older than human history. This is why some winds cluster around specific dates, not because of weather cycles, but because the Earth's orbit brings it back into alignment, with a memory embedded in the cosmic fabric. Spacetime is not a blank canvas. It is a palimpsest, a manuscript written over endlessly, never fully erased, each word leaving traces beneath the next. The wind is how the Earth reads those traces. Suddenly, the breeze at your back shifts again, not changing direction, but changing intention, a gentle pull, almost nostalgic, as though it is trying to bring something forward. From the depths of time, your breath responds without asking permission. Your shoulders loosen. A strange calm settles across your awareness. This sensation, you've felt it before. Not yesterday, not last week, much farther back, perhaps in another place, another season, another quiet moment, when the world leaned into memory. Maybe you felt it on a childhood afternoon, when a breeze paused long enough to imprint itself on your sense of self. Maybe you felt it on a mountain years ago, standing in the thin air where echoes feel close. Maybe you felt it in grief, in joy, in some moment where the world seemed to press gently against the edges of your life. Or perhaps you did not feel it personally. Perhaps humanity felt it. Perhaps entire generations responded to this same pattern, breathing with the Earth, as it remembered the long history of forces that shaped its being. Ancient cultures spoke often of old winds, winds that returned unchanged across centuries, winds that carried the voices of forgotten times, winds that the Earth itself seemed to summon when it wished to speak in the language of motion. They were not wrong. They were simply listening to the memory of the fabric. And now, as the breeze thins into stillness, you sense something else. A deeper question rising through you like a tide. If space-time remembers small events, does it remember great ones too? Does it hold the memory of continents shifting, glaciers advancing, meteors striking, mountains rising, oceans forming? Does the air carry echoes of a planet that no longer exists in the shape it once held? And even deeper still, does space-time remember events, not of Earth, but of the cosmos? The collapse of distant stars, the dance of galaxies, the passage of dark matter streams, the turning of the galaxy's own massive heart. If the fabric holds these memories, then the wind is not merely Earth's translator. It is the messenger of the universe's past. And suddenly, you feel the air shift again, light, high, almost shimmering, as though responding to a memory far older than the earth itself. The night deepens around you, not darker, but wider. The atmosphere grows thin with possibility. Even silence begins to listen. A faint drift glides across your awareness. Not a return, not a repetition, but a hint of something preparing to reveal itself. A memory too large to belong to Earth alone. The fabric is not only remembering, it is preparing. And the wind, faithful interpreter of space-time, is waiting to carry that preparation forward. The next movement, the next gradient, the next pulse will not come from within the Earth. It will come from the long river that the Earth itself is traveling through. The world is about to show you what memory becomes when space-time begins to clear space. For the next vast motion, the memory of the fabric fades gently, not as an ending, but as a door closing softly behind you, and beyond that door lies a larger silence. Not empty, not still, but steady, as though the world has settled onto a current that has been moving long before memory began. You feel it first as a change in the darkness around you. Not a shift in wind, not a change in temperature, but a soft lengthening of space, a sense that the night has grown deeper, without becoming darker. The air responds to this change in silence. It moves with a slow, deliberate motion that feels less like wind, and more like the world itself drifting quietly beneath your feet. This is not a breeze. It is not a front. It is not weather. This is the long drift. Not the small currents that rise from mountains, nor the density pulses from the Earth's core, nor the memory echoes of distant gravitational events. This current is older than all of them. Older than the continents, older than the oceans, older than the atmosphere itself. It is a river of space-time, flowing across the planet, in patterns so vast that they require centuries just to reveal themselves. Most winds change daily. Some patterns return seasonally, others repeat across decades. But the long drift moves across epochs. You feel it now as a gentle tug, not strong enough to sway a tree, not fast enough to rustle a leaf, but steady enough to shift your sense of direction without your body noticing when it began. The long drift is not confined to the air. It passes through stone, through ocean, through crust, through mantle, through the very structure of the Earth. It is not a movement of matter, but of geometry. Space-time itself is drifting. This drift is subtle, invisible, measured not in meters per second, but in centuries per breath, and yet the air follows it. The winds you feel today, trade winds, monsoonal flows, jet streams, carry the imprint of this ancient current. They inherit its direction, they echo its shape, they ride its centuries-old preferences. It is why global circulation remains uncannily stable, despite constant changes in weather. It is why certain regions of the Earth are consistently wet, or dry, or windy, or calm, not because the atmosphere decided, but because the deeper current has been flowing that way for thousands of years. The long drift is carved by planetary motion. The Earth does not orbit the Sun in a straight line. It spirals through the galaxy, through gravitational tides, through cosmic fields that bend space-time slowly. As the solar system passes through them, imagine the Earth moving through a vast, invisible river. You do not feel the water, but you feel the pressure it creates against the shape of the world. That pressure becomes gradients. The gradients become currents. The currents become global winds. But the river does not rush. It glides, quiet, ancient, a motion slow enough that it feels like the world is resting, even as it travels across the galaxy. Every few hundred years, a slight shift in the long drift subtly rewrites the climate of an entire hemisphere. Civilizations rise in periods when the long drift favors gentle patterns. They struggle when the drift tightens, and global circulation grows harsh. The world remembers these changes in its stories. Tales of years without summer, epochs of warming, centuries of unusual winds. But the deeper current remembers them more clearly than humans ever could. You feel the long drift now in your bones, not as history, but as presence. Your sense of balance pulls slightly eastward. Your breath moves a fraction more easily in that direction. your awareness aligns with something you cannot name, but cannot ignore. If you stand perfectly still, you will sense it, the air gently leaning toward a direction the atmosphere did not choose. This drift has no gusts. It produces no storms. It cannot be mapped on weather charts or predicted by climate models. It is not weather. It is background, a slow, permanent motion of the world that the atmosphere cannot resist. When sailors of the ancient world crossed the oceans, they sensed this drift. They found currents where logic said there should be calm. They discovered winds that repeated year after year. Beyond the reach of local conditions, they felt the atmosphere sliding across an unseen slope that stretched across the entire planet. They did not know the name of the slope. They called it fate, luck, destiny. But what they sailed across was space-time. The long drift also explains something that has perplexed meteorologists for generations. Why does the intertropical convergence zone wander north and south in multi-year cycles without any single cause? Why do El Niño and La Niña oscillate with rhythms too precise and too irregular to match surface conditions alone? Why do climate anomalies align with timelines that exceed all local atmospheric mechanisms? Because these phenomena ride the long drift. They are not simply reactions to heat redistribution. They are amplifications of space-time gradients that move so slowly, the world only notices their effects once they touch the atmosphere. Even ocean currents, those massive conveyors of heat and life, respond subtly to the same drift. The Pacific deepens and lightens in harmony with density patterns set by the long drift. Wind and ocean are simply two voices singing the same underlying motion. Some scientists call this the multi-decadal oscillation. Others call it the centennial shift. Some call it the background mode of the climate system. But these names are only attempts to label a movement they cannot see. What moves is space-time, and the drift is ancient. Long before the continents took their present shape, the long drift was flowing. Long before the first winds blew across the planet's young oceans, the deeper current was forming pathways that the atmosphere would later follow. The long drift remembers the shape of the early Earth, the long-age patterns when oceans were smaller, when mountains were taller, when the planet cooled unevenly, and the crust moved like a restless thought. These memories are not lost. They are embedded in the deep gradients that still guide the winds today. You breathe in and feel a soft tightening between breaths, as though aligning with an old rhythm, woven through the world, a rhythm too slow for you to perceive directly, but constant enough for your body to sense its pull. Even now, the long drift is guiding the air around you, not visibly, but inevitably. A faint movement brushes across your awareness, a soft reshaping of the quiet, as if the deeper current is preparing for its next gesture. And in this subtle rearrangement, you feel the next revelation forming. If the long drift is ancient, if it began before humans existed, if it shaped climates and winds long before we understood either, then it must also stretch outward, beyond Earth. The Earth is not the only thing moving. The solar system is drifting through the galaxy. The galaxy is drifting through cosmic filaments. Dark matter streams flow quietly through the void between stars. Gravitational tides pull the space-time around us in patterns too vast for any single world to sense. Yet Earth does sense it. The atmosphere senses it. You sense it. The long drift is not just planetary. It is cosmic. And the faint breeze rising now, barely a whisper, barely a memory, does not come from the Earth at all. It comes from the direction the solar system is traveling. A pull forward, a drift outward, a subtle orientation toward the grand current that carries our world through space. You feel it, without wind, without motion, without explanation. The deeper current is aligning with something larger, and the atmosphere will follow. The world is about to show you what wind looks like when space-time is guided, not by mountains, not by rotation, not by memory, but by the stars. The night shifts, opening quietly toward the next revelation. The faint pull you felt a moment ago does not fade like an ordinary breeze. It lingers, a soft directional pressure, as though the world has turned its face toward something vast and immeasurably distant. And the air, sensitive to any shift in the deeper current, leans with it, not by moving, by listening. For a breath, the atmosphere becomes still enough that you can feel the quiet between molecules, a stillness so deep it feels like the world has stepped aside to make room for something older, something arriving not from Earth, but from beyond Earth. You sense it first as a widening, a subtle expansion at the edge of thought, as though a horizon you never noticed has suddenly opened, not outward, inward, a spaciousness that makes the night sky feel closer than the air around you. And then it comes, a drift, not wind. Wind requires air. This moves even where air is absent. A drift that travels through the fabric itself, older than atmosphere, older than oceans, older than the Earth's surface, older even than the Earth's birth. You are sensing an interstellar current, a space-time flow shaped by the movement of the solar system through the galaxy's vast, invisible river. A current so ancient that planets formed within its motion, not outside it. Long before the Earth cooled, long before air gathered around its crust, long before life touched its oceans, this current was already present, carving its preferences into the space-time that would one day wrap around the world. The Earth was born inside a flow, and the atmosphere you breathe is still following the paths set by forces billions of years older than weather. You feel this truth now, in the way your awareness shifts toward a direction that no wind has chosen, no mountain has shaped, no ocean has defined. The deeper current is aligning with the motion of the solar system. Every planet, every moon, every drifting asteroid is carried through the Milky Way, within a sea of space-time so wide that stars themselves are but floating debris. In its slow, unending drift, as the solar system moves, the curvature around Earth shifts, not dramatically, not violently, but persistently, a soft, ceaseless push in a single cosmic direction. You may think of it as motion, but it is more than that. It is inheritance, a memory written not from the past, but from a journey still ongoing. The wind feels it. Even here, in the quiet place where you stand, you sense a faint pressure, guiding the atmosphere toward the path. The solar system carves through space-time. This is not imagination. It is not metaphor. It is physics, at a scale the body knows instinctively, but the mind has forgotten how to name. Consider Earth's orbit. We imagine it as a closed loop, a neat circle around the sunday. But in truth, it is a spiral that follows the sun. As the sun follows the galaxy, every second, the planet plunges through cosmic spacetime at thousands of kilometers per hour. Not forward, not upward, not sideways, but through a medium that shifts beneath it, like a slow, ancient tide. This tide shapes the deeper current. The deeper current shapes the wind. And so, every breeze that touches your skin carries a hint of emotion that began far beyond the atmosphere. You may wonder how air, fragile, local, ephemeral, can feel a force so vast that even stars drift like dust within it. But air does not need strength to feel direction. It only needs sensitivity. Air is the world's most willing follower. It is carried by geometry, the way a shadow is carried by light. When space-time curves, air moves. When space-time leans, air drifts. When space-time flows, air becomes its visible signature. The interstellar current does not create storms or alter weather patterns directly. Its influence is too soft for that, too patient, too ancient, but it creates a preference, a quiet bias, a faint orientation that the atmosphere adopts. Over centuries, the great circulation cells of the planet are not simply responses to Earth's rotation or its distribution of heat. They are also shaped by the direction in which the solar system travels through the galaxy. It explains something long observed, but rarely understood: why global winds have an underlying asymmetry, a slight imbalance that persists across eras, why the jet streams sometimes drift in ways the atmosphere alone cannot explain, why monsoon cycles show long-period fluctuations aligned with no known Earth system. Because the air is following a current that does not belong to Earth. It belongs to the galaxy. This current is not uniform. It carries the memory of everything the solar system has passed through. Ancient gravitational waves, from stars that died before Earth formed, regions of denser dark matter that tugged subtly on the sun's path, ripples from the galactic disk that shifted the geometry of space-time over millions of years, the faint tidal pull of spiral arms rotating like cosmic storms. Every one of these motions left quiet gradients in the fabric through which Earth travels. Gradients so old that the atmosphere does not distinguish them from nature. To wind, they are simply direction. Now, in the center of this deep insight, you feel something shift. A delicate tightening beneath your feet, a soft elongation of the air around you, a sense that the horizon has leaned 1 degree more toward the dark. The deeper current has aligned with a new layer of the long drift, not the planetary drift, but the stellar drift. The wind has not moved yet, but the air is aware. Your body is aware. The world is aware. There are places on Earth where this interstellar influence becomes visible, not through storms, but through patterns, winds that blow harder when Earth faces forward in its galactic orbit, calmer winds when Earth trails behind, unexplained northern biases in atmospheric transport, long-term oscillations, synchronized with the solar system's 226 million-year circuit around the Milky Way, patterns so subtle that no human lifetime is long enough to feel more than a whisper of them. But the Earth feels them. The atmosphere feels them. You, standing here in the quiet, feel them too. The interstellar current is not wind. It is not motion. It is orientation. It is the direction in which the universe is slowly carrying the world. And the wind is simply learning that direction. A faint drift touches your skin again, so thin it feels like a memory of motion, rather than motion itself. It is the closest air can come to imitating a force that does not require air to exist. You sense a truth emerging, soft, clear, inevitable. Wind is not just Earth's breath. It is the way Earth translates its journey through the cosmos. Every gust is a sentence in a language written by stars. Every breeze is a pause in a story older than life. Every recurring wind pattern is a reminder that the air you feel today was shaped by motions set in place long before Earth was born. And as this understanding settles, another shadow of insight begins to form, growing quietly, gently, in the space the breeze has left behind. If interstellar currents shape Earth's wind, what shapes the currents? What force guides the galaxy's motion? What flows through the universe? Even where matter is absent, even where light has not traveled, even where time stretches thin, you feel the world lean toward this question, as though preparing for the next chapter, a chapter in which the wind no longer begins on Earth or in the solar system, but in something deeper, the cosmic architecture that holds galaxies in their invisible hands. A faint motion passes through space-time, like the beginning of an answer, and the night expands, ready to reveal what wind looks like when born from the forces that shape the universe itself. The interstellar drift settles around you like a thin, transparent veil, not heavy enough to move the air, yet undeniable in the quiet weight it places on your awareness. It feels as if the world has leaned into a current, too large for atmosphere and too old for memory. A current not born of stars, but of something deeper, something the stars themselves obey. You stand still, and the night deepens again, not in darkness, but in depth, as though layers of space are slowly unfolding, revealing structures beneath the visible universe. At the edge of your perception, you sense a presence that carries neither warmth nor cold, neither pull nor push, but something stranger. Intention without motion, a direction without wind, a guidance without force, a drift without air. This is the beginning of the dark flow, not a flow of matter, not a flow of particles, but a flow of gravity, gravity shaped by structures the universe hides in the dark. You feel it approach not like a gust, but like a deepening of the horizon, a soft pressure from nowhere, as though space-time is bending toward something massive, far beyond sight. dark matter. Not the stuff of planets or stars, not the source of light, not the companion of atoms. A silent presence that outweighs everything you know, wrapping the galaxy like an invisible coastline, guiding the orbits of suns, shaping the paths of nebulae, carving filaments thicker than any mountain range on Earth. You have never touched dark matter, and yet you feel it now, shaping the direction of your breath. It does not move in the way air moves. It does not gust. It does not swirl. It does not rush. But it creates currents in spacetime, slopes and funnels and channels, through which the solar system drifts. As it travels through the galaxy, these currents are not measured in seconds, but in millions of years, yet the atmosphere on Earth still feels their whisper. You sense it now, a faint tightening along the horizon, a soft alignment under your feet, a beckoning from a direction the sky does not reveal. This is what scientists once glimpsed. When galaxy clusters began drifting in a direction no known structure could explain, as though the entire visible universe were being pulled toward a place older than the Big Bang. They named it the dark flow. You feel its echo. The solar system moves through gravitational tides, created by dark matter halos, cosmic filaments, and vast unseen clusters beyond our field of light. These tides create subtle gradients in the fabric around Earth. The gradients shape the deeper current. The deeper current shapes the wind. Not all winds, not everyday winds, but the long-term preferences, the background lean, that global circulation quietly inherits. Without knowing from what ancestor, the dark flow doesn't create motion in air. It creates motion in space-time. The air simply follows. You feel the difference in your body before you understand it with your mind. A slight shift in your balance, a quiet stretching in your chest, a sense that the ground beneath you has begun tilting toward a distant gravitational ocean. Your inner ear hears nothing. Your skin feels nothing. But the deep part of you, the part made of matter woven from space-time, responds. You are not sensing force. You are sensing orientation. Gravity at cosmic scales does not press. It guides. It draws structure into alignment. With vast filaments of dark matter, the web on which the universe is built, Earth moves within this web, as naturally as a leaf moving within a river. Not dragged, but carried. And every place Earth travels changes the shape of spacetime around it. The atmosphere learns these shapes. This explains something long observed, but never fully understood. Why Earth's long-term climate cycles align with patterns in the galaxy's motion. Why ice ages come in rhythms that echo cosmic influences. Why wind belts shift in epical harmonies. The atmosphere is reacting to the dark flow, not directly. The air cannot feel dark matter, cannot be pushed by it, but the fabric can. And when space-time leans, the air leans with it. You feel a gentle pull now, not enough to move the air, but enough to make you sense direction. In the stillness, as though something beyond the universe is tugging softly at the world. This tug has existed since before the Earth cooled, since before the moon formed, since before the sun ignited. It is not new. It is not fleeting. It is not born of weather or heat. It is a gravitational wind, a motion of space-time itself. Wind without air, the dark flow shapes it. Cosmic filaments sustain it. Dark matter sculpts the channels through which it moves. And the Earth, floating in this invisible river, translates cosmic guidance into atmospheric patterns. Where the dark flow leans, trade winds strengthen. Where cosmic filaments thicken, jet streams pivot. Where deep gravitational structures pull, the background wind circulation shifts. Humans notice none of this directly, but animals do. Migratory birds shift their flight paths in subtle long-term arcs that mirror the galaxy's gravitational tides. Whales adjust their routes over centuries, following paths older than their species. Even ancient human cultures placed sacred sites on lines aligned with forces they could not name, but could feel. A faint pressure touches your awareness again. Not physical, not emotional, but geometric. Space is leaning, not violently, not urgently, but unmistakably. The dark flow is a tide without water, a wind without air, a river that carries planets, In its slow, steady arm, it moves galaxies, as easily as wind moves leaves. And the Earth, small, delicate, unaware, floats in its path. Suddenly, the night around you seems larger, not wider, deeper. You begin to sense how thin the atmosphere truly is, a transparent skin, pressed against forces that stretch across millions of light years. The wind you felt moments ago was not moving air. It was moving perspective, a shift in the orientation of the deeper current. As the Earth aligns with the cosmic river, you inhale, and your breath feels elongated, drawn gently in the direction the galaxy is traveling. Your awareness leans with it. The dark flow does not disturb the air. It redefines the frame in which the air moves. It is the largest scale of guidance the atmosphere knows, and yet the atmosphere is not its primary audience. You are, because you, too, are made of matter shaped by space-time. Your atoms obey the same geometry that guides the stars. Your balance responds to shifts in the frame of existence. Your intuition feels the deep orientation of the universe's hidden rivers. The wind may be unaware of why it flows, but you, if you listen quietly enough, can feel the reason. The dark flow whispers not with motion, but with direction. A direction the Earth follows, on journeys lasting millions of years. A direction the atmosphere translates into long-term wind patterns. A direction the deeper current respects, even when mountains, oceans, and pressure systems attempt to divert it. This is the longest wind of all, the gravitational wind, a wind written not in air, but in space-time. And as the echo of this vast motion passes through you, another question forms. Soft, inevitable, waiting like a star seen only from the corner of the eye. If dark matter shapes the flow, what shapes the dark matter? What force creates currents? In the cosmic web, what movement precedes? Even the dark flow? The night grows still, so still that the silence feels stretched. Between two breaths, a tremor forms in the distance. Not in land, not in air, but in meaning. You feel it. The universe is preparing to show you a wind that moves not through planets, not through galaxies, but through existence itself. A current that carries the history of expansion and the fate of everything that vibrates within it. A current older than dark matter, older than stars, older than the long drift. A current born from the first gesture the universe ever made. It approaches softly, quietly, like a tide you cannot see, and the world waits. The tremor forming in the distance does not sound like anything you've ever heard. It is too quiet to be a vibration, too slow to be a pulse, too soft to be a wave. Yet, it carries weight, the kind of weight that bends attention, long before it bends space. It arrives not through your ears, not through the air, but through the subtle architecture of awareness, that deep, instinctive place inside you that responds to gravity. Before your mind even notices you've begun to fall, it is the feeling of something very old, beginning to move. You stand still. The world around you stands still. But something beneath existence takes a step. The first motion, not the flow of wind, not the drift of planets, not the tide of dark matter. Those are all late echoes, reflections, translations of a gesture, made long before atoms existed. This motion comes from a time when space-time itself was only beginning to learn what motion was. You feel it as a thinning, a subtle loosening of the air around you, as though space has inhaled and is holding its breath. From a moment so ancient that even memory has forgotten its shape, the wind does not rise. Not yet, but it listens. Because wind, fragile as it is the last living echo of a motion that predates matter. To understand this, you must imagine the universe before form, before stars, before dust, before the faintest whisper of light. In that beginning, there was no emptiness, there was no fullness, there was no silence. There was only potential, a vast, undefined tension, waiting for a direction. The universe did not explode into existence, as much as it leaned into existence, a gentle, primordial inclination in the fabric that did not yet exist, a direction chosen. Before there were distances to travel, this inclination became the first motion, not a burst, not a wave, not a force, a drift so fundamental that it shaped the meaning of forward, a drift so ancient that even after 13.8 billion years, every atom in your body still follows its orientation, a drift so quiet that only when all other motions fade can you feel a remnant of it press faintly against the edges of your breath. The first motion is not part of history. History is its shadow. It is not part of physics. Physics is the vocabulary it created. It is not part of wind. Wind is simply the atmosphere, replaying the orientation that space-time has carried. Since the earliest moment of becoming, the tremor deepens slightly, and you feel it now, not as sound, but as a soft forward pull in the very structure of the night, as if everything, sky, ground, breath, memory, is leaning together toward a point that does not yet exist. This is the signature of the primordial flow. When the universe first expanded, it did not do so evenly. Some regions stretched more quickly. Some resisted. Some formed subtle gradients. In the density of the newborn fabric, those gradients never disappeared. They persisted, woven into the cosmic web, etched into dark matter halos, stretched across intergalactic voids, and embedded into the curvature of every world that ever formed. The Earth is shaped by them. The solar system is guided by them. Galaxies drift along them, like leaves following the slope of a field too large for them to perceive. And wind, so small, so temporary, so delicate, still remembers the direction that space-time learned. In its first breath, you sense this now, in the way the air begins to tremble, not with motion, but with anticipation. Wind does not yet move, but it prepares to move. The molecules seem to lean forward, as if they know the deeper current is about to reveal something older than themselves. You inhale, and for a moment, your breath feels shared, as though the universe has paused to breathe with you. The first motion enters you like a memory, not your memory, memory that belongs to space-time. Memory of the first expansion, when direction began to exist, when forward became possible, when motion learned its name. You taste it on the air, a faint echo of the moment. When time took its first step, scientists describe this as inflation, a rapid stretching of space-time, moments after the universe began. But inflation was only the expression. The cause was something deeper, an orientation built into the fabric. Before the laws were written, you feel that orientation now, guiding the deeper current. Beneath the Earth, if you stand perfectly still, you can sense it as a pressure that does not come from any direction, yet touches you from all directions at once. It is the most ancient bias in existence. The preference for expansion, for outwardness, for becoming. Wind inherits this preference, not in every breeze, not in every gust, but in the long-term patterns that shape how the atmosphere grows, how storms spiral, how jet streams wander. Wind is not simply air in motion. It is space-time remembering how it first learned to move. The faint tremor continues, then deepens. Not louder, not stronger, but wider. You feel it in your posture, in the way your weight shifts toward the invisible horizon. This is the first motion, passing beneath everything. If you could see space-time now, you would witness something extraordinary. A vast, slow tide, moving through the universe, not made of matter, not driven by gravity, but driven by the very shape of the primordial expansion. It moves through galaxies, like wind moves through trees. It shapes filaments, like currents shape rivers. It presses gently against worlds, the way a memory presses against a dream. The atmosphere above you responds to this tide. Not directly, not immediately, but faithfully. This is why all storms spin in the same direction on each hemisphere. Why cyclones echo ancient spirals. Why global circulation has an outward bias. They are following a pattern woven into space-time. In the first moments of the universe, you feel the alignment strengthening now. Your breath deepens again, your chest expands, something inside you leans forward, as if preparing to cross a threshold older than time. Then, gently, the atmosphere stirs. The first motion of air is unimaginably soft. So soft it barely qualifies as movement. A tremble, a suggestion, a hesitation before becoming. It brushes against your cheek, like the faintest hint of a story the world is ready to tell. This is wind, answering the call of the first motion, not as memory this time. As continuation, the primordial drift has never ceased. It has only stretched, slowed, and woven itself into every current that exists. Every wind, from the smallest swirl of dust to the greatest global circulation, contains a fragment of that original lean. The air trembles again, slightly stronger, as though gaining confidence, in a direction older than the earth itself. Your body responds instinctively, aligning, softening, opening toward the same orientation. Motion feels natural again. After so many chapters of sensing without moving, the world begins to breathe outward, and you breathe with it. It is here, in this quiet threshold, that a deeper understanding arrives. The first motion never ended. It simply slowed enough for matter to form. It softened enough for atoms to bind. It steadied enough for planets to cool. It diffused enough for wind to inherit its direction. Every breeze is a child of the first drift. Every gust owes its existence to the moment the universe leaned forward. Every wind pattern is a translation of the primordial expansion that still echoes in the background of reality. And as this thought settles, a new sensation rises, a subtle shift in the deeper current, not outward this time, but upward, as though the universe is preparing to reveal not where motion began, but where motion goes. When the outward journey reaches its next boundary, wind quiets again. The night gathers itself. Space-time seems to inhale, gently tightening above you. The first motion has shown you its origin. Now it prepares to show you its continuation. A current, not outward, but upward, toward the places where existence thins into possibility. The next breath of the universe is already forming, and the wind waits to translate it. The upward tightening in the night does not bring fear. It brings awareness, a sensation that the sky above you has become less like an empty dome and more like a surface stretched across possibility, a membrane, a threshold, something the universe breathes through rather than beyond. Your senses reach upward without meaning to, as though your mind is being lifted by a current too subtle for air, too ancient for weather, too honest for imagination. You feel it in your sternum first, a rising, a slow and gentle expansion, as if the body remembers that upward is also a direction. The deeper current knows intimately. The first motion moved outward, but it also moved upward, not in space, but in being. Every drift since that primordial moment has been an echo of that upward gesture. The earth rising from dust, mountains rising from plates, heat rising from the mantle, air rising from the surface, life rising from the ocean, consciousness rising from life. Upward is the universe's oldest desire, and wind, though fragile, carries that desire in its quietest movements. A faint lift touches the air now, not a breeze, not a gust, but an unburdening, as though space itself has become lighter in its own shape. You sense a truth settling beneath that lift. Motion does not end. It returns. Every gust you have felt, from the small spirals born in dust to the great planetary winds that roam the equator, is part of a cycle, older than the Earth's rotation, older than the galaxy's drift, older than the universe's expansion. The deeper current is not a river that leads outward forever. It is a circuit, a loop. Motion does not vanish. When a wind dies, when a storm quiets, when air becomes still, it feeds back into the world that first shaped it. You begin to sense that return now, the way the night gathers wind's absence, as carefully as it gathers its presence, the way the silence holds shape, as gently as the air holds movement. If you listen carefully, you can feel where the drift goes. When it disappears, it returns to space-time, not as sound, not as force, not even as direction, but as curvature, a subtle readjustment. In the balance of the world, Every breeze that faded left a trace in the fabric. Every gust that collapsed softened a gradient. Every jet stream that shifted redrew a contour. The universe keeps all its motions, not as memory, but as structure. The wind you feel today contributes to the geometry that tomorrow's wind will follow. You begin to notice this now, in the quiet oscillation beneath your feet, a soft, rhythmic swelling that feels almost like the echo of the last breeze that passed. The return of motion is not the opposite of motion, it is the completion of it. To see this more clearly, imagine the wind rising from the ocean. It shapes waves. Those waves shape currents. Those currents shape temperature gradients. The gradients shape clouds. The clouds shape storms. The storms reshape pressure. Pressure shifts shape space-time density, and space-time returns that motion to the wind. The atmosphere is a loop, inside a larger loop, inside a larger loop still. Even the cosmic currents, the interstellar drift, the galactic tide, the dark flow, do not move endlessly outward. They fold, not like fabric collapsing, but like paths bending back into themselves across volumes of space, so vast you can only sense them when all nearer motions grow quiet. And tonight is quiet enough for you to sense the bend. The deeper current is curving, not sharply, not urgently, but gently, as though motion has begun to seek its own beginning. A soft, inward glide appears in the space above you, replacing the upward thinning, with a quiet settling, as though the sky is returning to a shape it prefers. This is the return, the moment when motion, having stretched itself outward, begins the long journey back toward equilibrium. But equilibrium, in a universe built on motion, is not stillness. It is orientation, a direction that restores balance. Wind, in all its forms, is the atmosphere's attempt to align with that orientation. Even now, as the night thickens softly, you feel the air preparing to move, not outward, not upward, but inward, as though gathering the shape of everything it has learned, from every drift that ever touched it. Your breath deepens again, synchronizing with a rhythm you did not know you remembered, a rhythm older than oxygen, older than air, older than pressure, older than motion. It is the rhythm of return. You sense it in the way your body subtly leans, as if drawn toward a center you cannot see. You sense it in the faint flex that ripples through the atmosphere like a heartbeat shared between earth and sky. You sense it in the stillness that does not feel like an ending, but like a gathering. Wind will rise soon, not because conditions demand it, but because motion is ready to return. This is how the universe completes itself. A drift begins in the deep fabric, from the core's resonance, from the planet's rotation, from the galaxy's tide, from the cosmic web, from the primordial lean. It travels outward, through matter, through oceans, through air, through bodies, through perception. It expresses itself as wind, visible, audible, tangible. Then, when the expression softens, it returns to the invisible, a cycle without origin and without end. You feel that cycle closing now, not as finality, but as transition, a soft sigh. In the geometry of the world, the atmosphere inhales, the deeper current tightens, something prepares to begin again. The return of motion, becoming the seed of the next drift. But there is one more realization, waiting at the edge of your awareness, something the night has been slowly leading you toward. Since the first chapter, wind is not separate from you. The drift that returns to space-time also returns to matter. Your body is part of the loop. Your breath is part of the cycle. Your awareness, that quiet inner place that felt the tremor before any air moved, is also a continuation of the first motion. You have been sensing these currents, not because they move around you, but because they move through you. And as this understanding settles, the air shifts once more, a faint, inward drift, so soft it feels like a final whisper from a story that has not ended, a whisper that brushes your cheek, as though reminding you that the deeper current has never stopped moving, not since the beginning, not now, not ever. And as you stand in that whisper, You feel something opening. Not outward, not upward, but gently, quietly, beyond. A motion that is not wind, not space-time, not cosmic drift, but the next layer of whatever the universe is still becoming. It rises beneath the quiet, like a question without form, waiting for a listener. And the night, patient as ever, lets the story continue breathing forward.